Welcome everyone to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Oceanside School Board on June 23rd, 2020. This is a Zoom meeting. We hear there's about 200 folks out there right now, give or take, plus 200 folks out there watching us. We welcome you all with us tonight, and we're glad that you're with us and can share the information that we are presenting tonight on our regular agenda. I will call the roll of the board members. Board members, Vice President Stacy Begin.
Present.
Clerk Eric Joyce.
Present.
Board member Eleanor
Present.
Evans. Board member Raquel
Present.
Alvarez. And our superintendent Julie Vitale is with us this evening as well as other staff members that you'll see throughout the evening. Let me get myself in the camera there as I'm off of it. A little editorial there. The next item of business in front of us would be the report out of closed session item this evening. We have no information to report out this evening. Oh, we do. We do have information to report out this evening. Yeah, I got that name.
It's right there.
I don't have that. I don't have that. I know. We are proud to present this evening that the Oceanside School Board unanimously approved the recommendation of Dr. Jose Villarreal as the new principal of Oceanside High School. And he'll be joining us starting very shortly. And we'll welcome him aboard. All right, that's the report out from closed session. Next item, item 2C, approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Move to approve.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Seeing no one, the motion carries 5-0. I think I'll go with that route, you guys. Item 3, superintendent's report. Dr. Vitale.
Just two short items. I would like to welcome Dr. Villarreal to Oceanside Unified High School District. We're very happy to have you on board. And we look forward under presentations to reporting out to the board the impact of our work groups, the recommendations that they've made, the various parent meetings that we've had, and all of the input and our current thinking on returning to the school. It was a beautifully collaborative effort, and we look forward to giving that report. So that is when my further report will be made.
Excellent. All right. The next item would be board reports. These will be short reports from the board members of any activities that they wish to share at this point in time. Start with member Stacy. Begin.
Hello. All right. Hello, everyone. I haven't done that many things. It hasn't been that long. I attended a Ditmar Surfside graduation, the virtual graduation drive-through. It was amazing. I'm so glad I got to see it. I also attended a parent input meeting, and that was last week, and that was very informative. That's it.
Thank you very much. Board member Raquel Alvarez, report, please.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for all being here. Actually, I attended graduations for El Camino and Oceanside High School. A couple of different parades for elementary levels also that were going on at different schools, and still working at Nutritional Services. And I do want to thank Nutritional Services for all that they're doing, and also the food pantry that has been brought over to Mission from Oceanside High School. The students that are serving our families there are amazing, and many families are obviously being served for that. I also attended a parent input meeting, and thank you all for attending all of those meetings. We had an amazing turnout to those meetings, so thank you all for those that participated and gave your input. It was greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Raquel. Board member Eleanor Evans.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My meetings have been basically Zoom. I went to the California School Board Association meeting, and we had a discussion regarding the governor's budget, COVID-19, and some other issues that are current and dear to us. I've been appointed to the County of San Diego Board of Supervisors, Human Relations Commission. Okay, and I had the opportunity to listen to the National Education Association forthcoming representative assembly in terms of how they will be nationwide dealing with some of the issues that we're facing. Thank you.
Thank you, Eleanor. And finally, board member Eric Joyce, clerk of the board. Eric Joyce.
Thank you. Yes, thank you again for everyone being here tonight. The attendance is clear. Everybody's interested to figure out what we're going to do in the fall. All of you we're just as interested as all of you to figure that out. And get sometimes the hardest part is just not knowing for sure. So thank you for your patience, and we'll keep getting through this together. I also went to the OHS graduation, which was amazing. I had so much reservation about a drive-through graduation. I was really skeptical, and I was absolutely blown away. It was amazing to see that moment you get after graduation where all the families come together and there's so much emotion about what a student has gone through to get out of high school, and the families that embrace each other. Well, we got to see that over and over and over again, and I get the chills every time, and this was no exception. So we are so proud of our graduates, and thank you for getting out there and representing us well, which we know you will. The last thing that I want to talk about really briefly is everyone wants to get kids back in school. So as a community, the best thing we can do is follow the guidance and the science behind it. We've got to protect each other. We've got to protect our neighbors. Please work with us together to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Well said. Next item on the agenda would be consent calendar, items 5A through 5BB. Do I have a motion to approve consent?
I'll motion.
Got a motion by member Begin to approve.
I'll second.
Got a second by member Evans. Any discussion? Please vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Thank you very much. All right. Let us move on now to the item that everybody is here for, I think. Item 6A. Presentation and consideration for the 2020-2021 school year opening in response to the COVID-19, incorporating the California Department of Public Health guidelines for schools. We'll start with a staff presentation. Julie?
Yes, we'll just wait 1 minute for that presentation to come up.
Very good. There we go.
So we have several people that will be panelists tonight. So there'll be several of us jumping in and out of this presentation. And we're very pleased to present this to the Board of Education. And this is basically a report out of work that we started back on May 20th. And you'll notice that it's a very long presentation. We believe it's a very thorough presentation. We do anticipate questions and your wonderings and thoughtful engagement from you. And we've also had very thoughtful engagement from the community, all of which we're going to share out tonight. So the next slide is a structure, basically the structure for our work. And we'll give you some very detailed descriptions about our work groups. This is just the high overview, but we had 23 work groups and 180 people engaged in those work groups. And we'll be reporting out on the recommendations of those groups. The way we structured our work is the work groups did all of the work. It was made up of classified, certificated, administrative staff, along with leadership, leading each of those work groups. And then any issues or problems that really needed to be solved went to the steering committee. And that was made up of our association leadership, our executive cabinet, and myself. And of course, now we're in the place where we're bringing that information to the Board of Education. Alongside of that is the parent and guardian feedback that we've obtained, both through surveys and a series of meetings. And we'll be giving you all of that information that was gathered, and also the guidance that we've received. And we've received guidance from the Center for Disease Control, the California Department of Public Health, and the California Department of Education. And just today, hot off the press, we received additional guidance from the San Diego County Office of Education. So our work has been very fluid, and we've adapted as we've received more information. The next slide shows you some of those guidance documents, and this presentation is going to be sent out to all stakeholders tomorrow. And in that presentation, all of these documents will be linked, as well as these being available on our website. We've been immersed in reading these documents, and what I realized when I participated in some of the parent meetings is that parents and guardians, they're not immersed in these documents, but this is how we're making decisions. And so we think it's very important for people to understand where we're getting the information that we're getting. The COVID-19 industry guidance document for schools and school-based programs, that came out June 5th. And I will remind the board that we started our work back on May 20th. And I'll show you a timeline in just a minute. The Stronger Together document from the CDE came out June 8th. The latest health order came out on June 19th. We had two last week. And then, of course, we have ongoing information from the CDC. And we'll give you information about that decision tree later on in the presentation, because that really guides our thinking on the reopening of schools. So on the next slide, we show you the timeline of where we began and then where we are now. So we began these work groups on May 20th, and we had 23 work groups of 180 staff from all facets of our district. And on May 22nd, we deployed a parent survey where over 4,600 parents and guardians responded to options that they would prefer. And we'll be sharing details about those results. On June 5th, the CDPH, the California Department of Public Health, released their industry guidance, which informs our work. And on June 8th, the California Department of Education released their guidance. And then between June 17th and June 19th, we held a series of parent and guardian forums to get further inputs and really get a sense of where parents and guardians are most concerned, what they're concerned about, their thoughts about how we follow guidance and solve some of these issues, some of their experiences during the closure in spring. And we're really trying to give you the major themes that were involved in those conversations. So there are kind of two things that we're approaching tonight and that we're trying to accomplish. One is to give you a report out of all of those work groups and all of that information that was gathered, and honor the work that people were engaged very intensely in over a course of a few weeks while they were dealing with the shutdown in their personal lives and while they were still engaged in their work as well. So we appreciate the input of everybody, because this is a result of hours and hours of work. So we're reporting out those recommendations and considerations. And please know that please remember that as we were engaged in this work, we didn't have all of this guidance. So some things, of course, will need to be adjusted. We based everything on the idea of returning safely. And so as we present this information to you, please know that that was one of our highest priorities. So in the next slide, Dr. Mercedes Lovey will be talking about our work groups and reporting out on the information, and I will see you a little bit later.
Good evening, board. Thank you so much, Dr. Vitale. In order to meet the needs of our community, we knew it would be essential to call together our staff, teachers, and administrators to examine the guidance provided for the health of our teams and our students, and also to have educators share their expertise and experiences. Therefore, the work groups called together with three purposes. The first was to collaborate to create an organizational framework for schools in light of the changes presented by COVID-19. Second, we wanted to develop a handbook to guide the work of our teachers and staff during this time. And third, we wanted to ensure that we would have a quality educational program delivered to students while at the same time reducing the risks to students and staff in the likelihood that they would contract with COVID-19. Next slide, please. To guide our work, we had some guiding principles which were based on the mission and vision of our district. These included having a full year of instruction for all students, reducing the number of people in one location to provide for physical distancing, and following the health orders of the county health department, state, and the CDC. Next slide. There were 23 work groups that closely studied all aspects of our educational system and program, including work groups for instruction, human resources, business services, and technology. These groups met over several weeks and for multiple hours. People gave freely of their time and their expertise to ensure that we would have the best recommendations possible. Each member provided insight into the particular areas that they were studying and shared their expertise. I will now turn this over to Mrs. Gravelin, Senior Director. Next slide, please.
Good evening, everyone. It's my pleasure to have worked with the elementary work group, which consisted of 3 teams. We had a team for preschool, we had a TK, transitional kinder through 2nd grade team, and a 3rd through 5th grade team. Certificated and classified staff members came together to consider potential return options based on our current health and safety guidelines. The following models were recommended by our work group. First, the hybrid model, which would consist of in-class instruction for 2 days a week and online instruction for 3 days a week, or a 100% online learning model. Both models limit the number of individuals on school campus at a given time and allow for safety guidelines to be followed. With the hybrid model, the physical classroom layout, as well as the use of a common area such as the cafeteria and playground, would need to support proper social distancing. Next slide, please. With both models, it is recommended that grading and student feedback occur, and that our parents are informed of the expectations for their student. During the first days of school, time should be spent building an online classroom culture and assessing the students' social, emotional, and academic needs. Support for our families regarding digital platforms and curriculum should be provided. Next slide, please. Another consideration is access to student materials and resources, both at home and at school. Individualized resource kits will be needed to provide students with the necessary tools and to keep them from needing to share materials. It is also recommended that student devices and materials be transported to and from school on a daily basis to ensure students are prepared for learning in the home or in the school environment. I'm now going to turn it over to Dr. Richard Lawrence, who will share about our secondary work groups.
Good evening. It was an honor to work with the secondary work group, which consisted of 2 teams, a middle school team and a high school team. The teams were comprised of certificated and classified members who came together to consider multiple options based on different scenarios. A recommendation for consideration that came out of these meetings was a hybrid schedule. In this schedule, students would come to school as part of either group A or B. Students would attend classes twice a week for a half day and engage in online learning for 3 days a week. The schedule will allow for face-to-face instruction, provide students an opportunity to engage in lab exercises, while also receiving guidance on the work they would need to complete during the online sessions. On the days when students are not engaged in the face-to-face learning sessions, students will engage in an advisory class, to engage in class meetings with the teacher, to look at or engage in social emotional learning lessons, counselor meetings, and restorative circles to maintain connections with both their peers and adults on campus. Further considerations needed for this model are students' access to supplies, needs for elective courses taken online, a look at how physical education and other electives or CTE courses will be delivered and monitored for engagement in an online environment, and academic grading in this environment will require further development. Next slide, please. The secondary work group also came up with recommendations for consideration for enhancing our online or asynchronous learning structure if we had to go 100% online. A consideration is that a universal or consistent format is used, so there is embedded familiarity with the manner in which the content is presented within the asynchronous learning environment. Within this environment, teachers would provide a structure that would include a warm-up, direct instruction, independent practice, additional direct instruction, or assessment time and wrap-up activities for each day of online learning. Future consideration with this environment includes students engaged in one platform across levels, use of an online learning platform called Apex, which will provide students with access to online tutorial engagement and or classes where students can use that for both original credit or credit remediation. This is a tool that has been used within our district for a number of years. Teachers will need additional time to engage in professional development to set up their online learning classrooms, and grading within this environment will also require future discussion. I now introduce to you Greg Moon, Chief Technology Officer.
So in the instructional or educational technology arena, there were about 7 major considerations that the group gave. This was the largest group of the 23. We had approximately 20 people in there representing both classified, a lot of teachers, more than half the group was teachers, and then some administration also. The number one recommendation was that student devices be as close to a 1-to-1 ratio as we possibly can get. There you can see some other peripheral, some other additional information here about devices. This was the biggest one. Let's get as close to 1-to-1 as we can with what we own and what we can get. And there were some things, have a few on hand, so things are up for repair. There was a concern, or there was an expression of an interest in having accountability, that our assets are checked out through our resource management system, that we prepare documentation to help guide students on the proper care and handling of devices, that we looked into a low-cost insurance option for families for devices, and that we looked into investigating the economic feasibility of providing protective cases. So this was obviously not a contested topic. This was one everybody was easily on board. Second area was student internet access for being offsite. When they're on our campuses, we know they have pretty good connectivity, but as they go home, the connectivity can be spotty sometimes. Some have great connections, some have okay connections, some have no connections. So in order to have a completely equitable environment, the student internet access is something that is not just a consideration, but a recommendation from this particular work group. For students that don't have maybe a home or a home that's in the same place all the time. For example, our homeless population, we would provide hotspots. And then we had a recommendation to look into the feasibility of putting up district manager wireless access points in some neighborhoods. For example, in apartment complexes, there might not be a lot of options about how, the kind of internet service you can order. So this is, again, these are recommendations and considerations. Third area that we looked at was online safety. There was an expression that we believe that digital citizenship is going to be an absolute necessity. There's a recommendation that within the first 2 to 4 weeks of school, that digital citizenship lessons be delivered to students, because we know they're going to be online more. and that we do some professional learning, some training with teachers, and reacquaint them with things like common sense media, Nearpod. These are the curriculum type of areas for digital citizenship. So we know that this needs to be an area of emphasis. Again, there was an expression of interest in having responsible use agreements, that students read and sign these agreements so that we all have an understanding of what the use of the devices and the software, the infrastructure, what that looks like in a responsible environment. And then there was an interest in being able to monitor students online for safety. So the group wants staff to look into software that would give teachers the ability to monitor what's going on Chromebooks during school hours. We'll utilize what we already own as far as our web filter goes and Content Keeper to help monitor what's going on within the Google domain and across our network. We'll look at a product called Bark that drills down into the Google activity within a domain. And then there was the word consistent was used quite a bit. So there's an interest from this group about utilizing tools that are pretty standard and stable. For example, Google Classroom, use that to exchange documents back and forth between teachers and students so that a lot of stuff doesn't have to be passed outside of our domain. There was a great deal of interest in professional learning. I think everyone to a person agrees that if we're going to ask teachers to teach in a way that they haven't, may not have done a lot before, that we need to help get them up to speed on that. So there was a great deal of interest in professional learning, and not just providing sit and get type professional learning or just watch this video kind of thing, but do it in some different modalities to allow teachers to basically meet every teacher where they're at and take them to the next spot. There was, based on some surveys that we did, there was an interest in focusing on the 4 C's for students: critical thinking, communication, collaboration, and creativity. And that start asking students to do more in these areas. So we have technology-rich environments for the most part, so we want to make sure that we're leveraging those to get some good activity out of students other than just kind of low-level stuff. Teachers or our group also said that it can't be all tech all the time. That's just not healthy. Just like no tech ever is probably not healthy either. And that we need to look at distance learning versus distant teaching. We need to get an education out there, school people on what blended learning is, and basically create resources for teachers to give them some understanding of these different pedagogical approaches for 21st century stuff. Delivery platforms and technologies was another area. The word consistent kept coming up a lot. There was no appetite for let's use a whole bunch of different tools. There was more of a let's find some tools that work for us, use those very well, train people on those. For example, on a learning management system, we'll probably land on a product called Seesaw for our K2 this year. Then we'll utilize Google Classroom across 312. It was a little bit surprising to me about how many responses we got from teachers when we went to distance learning about, I didn't know Google Classroom did this type of stuff. So I think there's been a little bit of awakening and epiphany there. So I think we'll definitely work with teachers to support them on Google Classroom for the next year. Communication was an interest from the group. They felt that we need to communicate with students, families, and staff. And you can see the different recommendations they had across. There's some multiple themes. You'll see these themes throughout some of the other slides for technology. Curriculum, there was an interest in teachers creating things and sharing things across the district, because everybody's experience is going to be kind of more similar now than different. And then there was a great deal of concern or interest in having full-on technical support across the entire organization through multiple channels, multiple languages, help staff, students, and families with their home connections where possible. And then the support personnel actually asked for software so they could remote into devices and help people by taking over their device. It's a lot easier than doing things over the phone. There was a topic brought up about staff internet access, that if teachers are going to be conducting classes from home, that if their internet access is not adequate, that could be a concern. And then lastly, there was a great deal of talk about physical safety, but we knew that other groups, maintenance and operations, for example, would be addressing those. So the one thing we took out from physical safety was, if devices are going to be shared, that there's an interest in our organization developing a protocol and publishing a document that would say exactly how to sanitize those devices so that people remain safe there. And that was it for the instructional and educational technology recommendations. And so I would like to introduce Mr. Jim Wood, who will go through with special education.
Thank you, Mr. Moon. Good evening. I had the honor of working with our elementary and secondary special education groups that generated the ideas that I will share. For students with disabilities, we may want to make the following considerations. In order to maximize interaction with the curriculum and minimize travel across campuses, we may want to consider providing, to the greatest extent possible, all related services within the classroom on the days that students are on campus. This would include occupational therapy, physical therapy, adaptive PE, and any individualized support. For those students that cannot be provided these services in the classroom, we may want to consider having them provided directly through a web-based platform. We recently adopted Presence Learning as a platform for our speech language services. When offering a free appropriate public education, we may want to consider whether students who have underlying health conditions may require home hospital or distance learning models. And students who require additional teaching and reinforcement, we want to consider whether they can access direct instruction with a higher frequency than other students. When considering assessment of students, knowing that the majority of assessments require face-to-face interaction, we may want to consider environmental structures, including room setup, plexiglass dividers, and room dividers. We'd also want to consider whether facilities may be available for assessment during times that the majority of students are not attending on campus. And lastly, we may want to consider the use of consistent interventions for all students prior to referring for special education assessment. With that, I will turn it over to Mrs. Gradlin.
Our English language development recommendations follow both the state and federal guidelines, which include scheduled time during the day for both designated and integrated ELD across subject areas and in both a synchronous and asynchronous learning environment. Next slide, please. The proposed schedules, hybrid and 100% distance learning, will allow for small group targeted instruction and intervention on Wednesdays and afternoons for our elementary students, and afternoon sessions for our secondary students. Teachers will use a blended instructional approach, both synchronous and asynchronous. An emphasis will be placed on students who have had minimal participation during our distance learning and may have learning gaps that need to be addressed, our long-term English language learners, our dually identified students, English learners with an individualized education plan, and our immigrant students, those that have been in the country for 3 years or less. Next slide, please. Another group that came together looked at our extracurricular work and our educational opportunities. This consisted of educators across all 3 grade spans, elementary, middle, and high school. The team looked into considering activities determined as potentially low risk, which could still occur on the school campus, and those that might be at higher risk, which might need to happen in a virtual environment. This would include possibly our music programs, band, and dance. High-risk activities could be engaged in virtually with student performances, and demonstration of student learning could be shared through video clip and other means. I'll turn it over to Dr. Lawrence.
It was my pleasure to also work with the physical education work group, which was made up of elementary, middle, and high school PE teachers, along with administrators and school nurse. Each member provided insight into ways we can engage students in PE in both an online or face-to-face learning environment. The work group had made recommendations for consideration to include to engage students in PE through an online learning environment. Through students would engage in activities such as dance and fitness through Zoom. PE teachers would create video demonstration activities, obstacle courses, and daily lessons for students to engage in while keeping a log of fitness activities within an online learning environment. In a face-to-face learning environment, it is recommended that classes are kept at no more than 20 students per class at the secondary level and 15 at the elementary level due to spacing limits. Initially, students would engage in applied fitness concepts classes at which they would learn the concepts prior to then moving into small group workouts and use equipment that uses minimal hand contact. I would now like to introduce to you again Mr. Jim Wood, Director of Special Education.
Thank you, Dr. Lawrence. We also have a preschool. We offer state preschool and special ed preschool. We had a group that worked as preschool that consisted of members of both of those groups. Preschool learning is supported and reinforced by fewer gaps in learning opportunities. The group wanted to make sure that we could consider grouping students. If students do go 2 days a week, or if there are different days students attend, that we spread those out during the week. So rather than having students attend 2 days that are consecutive, like Monday and Tuesday, considering Monday and Thursday and Tuesday and Friday to minimize the number of days in between their attendance in classes. Our classes are supported by teachers and instructional assistants. So we want to consider having no more than 6 students in the classroom at a time. With adults, that would be about 10 people in the classroom. This would support social distancing and provide the space necessary to engage in play-based learning and floor time. Toys used during learning would need to be frequently cleaned, and we would want to minimize the number of contacts for each item. Preschool would benefit from additional training for families and professionals centered upon the use of online materials. And and we would want to consider providing direct instruction for hand washing, social distancing, and self-care as part of the daily routine and daily schedule. Next slide, please. At the other end of our K-12 system, we have our adult transition program serving students who are 18 to 22 years old. To maintain social distancing and facilitate learning, we would want to consider having no more than 6 students in a classroom at a time. These classes are also supported by teachers and instructional assistants. Our students perform on-campus job skills training. Maintaining a smaller number of students daily on campus will allow this to continue in a safe manner. Our teachers and instructional assistants will support with both in-class and distance learning opportunities. We like to build in scheduled time for student-parent training to support distance learning and the use of augmentative and alternative communication devices that students would utilize at home and in the community. We want to continue to provide direct instruction in the areas of self-care, safety, use of personal protection equipment, and community involvement. And now I'll turn it back over to Dr. Jory Sparks.
Thank you, Jim. Good evening, everyone. A group of 14 professionals, including counselors at each level, teachers, and district leadership, convened to determine recommendations for student support and counseling. This group chose to plan backwards from a full distance learning option, which will be the default, with enhancements. We also considered a hybrid model to allow for incremental student-to-teacher interaction and for counseling support to be provided as much as possible. It was noted immediately to be a priority of counselors in the group to continue with virtual counseling sessions for individuals in small groups, which continued upon school closures. Additionally, there was a desire for homeroom advisory period to support students in their social emotional needs and check-ins with counselors, which you heard Dr. Lawrence speak about earlier. Counselors would also be providing students and families with learning tools and resources to manage stress, deal with change, identify self-care needs, and understand one's own social emotional health. Next slide, please. Additionally, elementary counselors will continue guidance lessons on the social emotional competencies that began this year. And this practice will begin at the secondary level as well, with a curated social emotional curriculum being worked on this summer. All partners and contracted service providers would continue providing virtual counseling as well, and increase in-person counseling as health and safety guidelines change, and the virtual counseling allows for some partners and providers to be flexible and more fluid with their school-specific assignments and be able to respond to students as needed. To engage all partners and contracted service providers, we would want to engage them in the work of contacting, connecting with, and engaging all learners on a weekly basis. And finally, we wanted to continue the work with teacher teams and administration at each site to determine the understanding of what engagement looks like on a daily and a weekly basis. Those are the recommendations from the student support and counseling team. I now turn it over to Associate Superintendent of HR, Dr. Todd McAteer.
Dr. McAteer, are you ready for your slide?
I'm here.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, great. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Sparts. So with Human Resources, our group worked with our union representation. Both unions have paramount interest in making sure that staff safety is a priority. In addition, we need to follow the Federal Center for Disease Control and Prevention and the Cal OSHA Occupational Safety and Health requirements to ensure that our staff is safe as we plan for reopening. So with that, required staff training is the first component to make sure that our employees have the proper education. We can deliver that through our Keenan module, which has a COVID-19 virus facts, as well as a cleaning and disinfecting your workplace. These will be preventative measures and information for all our employees to receive. Furthermore, for our staff, we need to make sure that we provide the personal protective equipment, which would include masks, face shields, gloves, etc., for all our employees as needed. For our staff, there needs to be special consideration for at-risk employees. For classified, that may be to continue or work remotely from work. For our educators, we can assign distance learning instruction for those that need it, and then provide additional safety modifications as needed on site. As we plan to return, we need to follow up with the guidelines for tracking and reporting confirmed cases. And then we also have the U.S. Department's expansion for FMLA leave. This is emergency leave. It's not deducted from employee balances, as it provides opportunities for employees to access time away from work for emergency sick leave up to 10 days for confirmed positive testing or being exposed. In addition, there are 10 weeks of 2/3 pay for employees to help with childcare. So these are some of the considerations from the Human Resources Department. Going into more details with our safety as we plan reopening would be Dr. Soto.
Thank you, Dr. McAteer. Work groups as well, addressing some of the needs that has already been, some of the concerns that have already been addressed. For transportation will be provided for eligible scholars, which are those with transportation written into their individual educational plans, or for those high schoolers residing on the base and attending Oceanside High School. Social distancing will be practiced, and as noted on this diagram, scholars will sit one per bench, skipping every other row. We will load the bus from back to front to minimize interaction with others. This will reduce our capacity on an 80-passenger bus, as noted here, to 15 scholars at a time in order to address the social distancing. High contact areas will be addressed and cleaned frequently. Next slide, please. Cleaning and hand washing is a priority for us in our entire district. Spray bottles with approved cleaning solution, along with paper towels and gloves, will be provided for each classroom. Traditional cleaning will occur as is our usual practice, but staff will be increasing the disinfecting of high-touch areas. Hand sanitizer will also be provided in gallon-sized containers for all classrooms and front offices for school sites and district offices. Next slide, please. As recommended by the California Department of Public Health, staff should wear face coverings, and we will be providing face shields to staff and available for students. Signage will be posted at entrances to all of our sites. Next slide, please. As mentioned earlier, signage such as those shown here will be posted in both English and Spanish at both the entrances of our school sites and district offices as reminders of social distancing and wellness guidelines. Next slide, please. Feeding all of our scholars, meaning all lunch meals will be individually wrapped in a grab-and-go style and encouraged to be consumed after dismissal to minimize interaction with others. Breakfast will be offered in the morning in a similar grab-and-go like the breakfast in the classroom program that they are already been engaged in. We will assess this as we near August 31st to determine if we are allowed to continue with universal feeding. And remember, universal feeding is where we're allowed to feed all scholars and do not confirm their status for either paid or reduced lunching. We will be reverting back to the requirements under the National School Lunch Program beginning September 1st. However, we are monitoring this and we are checking daily to find out if we will be allowed to apply for a waiver to continue with the universal feeding, where we'll be allowed to provide lunch to all of our families and scholars. At this time, I'd like to reintroduce, my apologies. Next slide, please. One more. I forgot about sports. As we begin to prepare for the fall reopening, OUSD has been cleared to return to play for sports. CIF has issued a very strict and comprehensive guidelines and addressing each sport with cleaning standards clearly defined. Our site administrators and athletic directors have been provided the guidelines, and we're excited to welcome back our athletes to campus for training this week. With that, I would like to reintroduce Dr. Levy to continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Soto. As we've continued with all of this work with our different work groups, we realized that as we looked at the health and educational guidelines, we knew that our parents and guardians had ideas and concerns that they wanted to share with the district. So we decided that we wanted to have a parent and guardian input meeting. And with that in mind, we had specific purposes. Those purposes were to collaborate with families, to identify the thoughts and concerns that they had, and also to provide information about the possible modifications to the school operational program that could be put into place based on the COVID-19 health guidance. Next slide, please. The response to our inquiries has been amazing. In May 2020, a survey went out to all families and staff about their preferences to how learning would occur in the fall. We had over 4,600 families reply. About 53% of families wanted an on-site program. 36% of our families had a preference for a hybrid program, and 15% wanted a 100% distance learning program. Among staff, a majority of staff wanted a hybrid system to reduce the risk to students. Next slide, please. The work groups identified 3 potential schedules for the fall, as you'd heard outlined by Dr. Lawrence and Mrs. Gravlin. While OUSD would prefer to have all students return 100% to school in the fall, local health orders would need to be addressed and modifications to school operations would be needed to reduce the risk to students and staff. As you can see on this slide, in order to provide students with on-site instruction and have physical distancing, the hybrid model where students are on campus for 2 days a week and remotely learn on the other 3 days reduces the site's capacity capacity to hold all students by 50%. This creates class sizes of 15 to 18 students in each room at one time. This is the lowest risk option we have in distance learning, which students can learn both at home and provided with instruction remotely and in person. Next slide, please. This graphic illustrates how having a hybrid model allows for more physical space within a classroom. As the diagram shows, the typical capacity for a classroom is 31 students. With full physical distancing requirements in place, capacity for a classroom is reduced to 12, much like we see on our buses that Dr. Soto shared with us. Next slide, please. We also had a huge gathering of families. We sent out a request for parents to come to a DPAC committee meeting. With the DPAC committee, we had about 150 parents attend. They had many excellent questions and said we needed to have more meetings to communicate with our families. Based on the information from our survey and our DPAC meeting, we organized a variety of meetings over 3 days in order to ensure that families had a choice about when they could come and speak with us. We also wanted to allow for two-way communication by making sure that the groups were small enough. 28 facilitators provided 36 small group meetings held over 3 days. There were over 600 attendees and 180 written responses and questions about what our plans were for the fall. People took time out of their busy lives and we're very grateful for that opportunity. Next slide, please. In the meetings, there were certain things that came forward. Those included the challenges that families and students were experiencing. These challenges included accessing Wi-Fi and devices, the time spent supporting students in learning with both content knowledge and problem solving, and the variation of their experiences with teachers in assigning work, holding online meetings, and the communication processes. This presented significant challenges for many of our families. Next slide, please. Parents were very appreciative of the work that we did in such a quick amount of time when we were met with the shutdown in March. What they also shared is that they wanted to make sure that their children were safe and able to have school in the future as normal as possible. What they shared is that they wanted choices about the education for their children. They also expressed worry about mental health concerns, the socialization opportunities that their children had, and child supervision. Many families wanted to know what the arts and sports would look like in the fall. Listening to parents of children with special needs, they expressed concerns about getting the services they needed for their children. As Mr. Wood expressed, we are continuing to refine how we provide those services. Parents of children with health challenges also expressed concerns with large group classes. The need for childcare was paramount to many families, especially those who had young children, and also, again, the need for more consistency. While we found that parents were very appreciative of all the efforts. There was a lot of variation among teachers about when work was assigned, the communication process, and the virtual meeting sessions with students. Overall, there were 5 desired services from schools. When we first went to our remote learning model, we focused on our educational opportunities, which was essential to the health and well-being of our students. Parents also identified nutrition, student supervision, enriching activities, sports and art, and socialization were also areas that we wanted to make sure that we addressed. One parent said, "I didn't know how important school was to my child until it was gone." And we want to make sure that as we move forward, we can look at ways to provide these services in both a hybrid and distance learning environment so that we can make sure that all of our students receive those services and opportunities that we've come to expect from our schools. I would now like to turn it over to Mrs. Grablin and Dr. Lawrence, who will outline the proposals for our secondary and elementary schools. Mrs. Grablin?
Yes. The elementary hybrid model, which is outlined on the slide, has students attending class on campus 2 days a week and participating in distance learning 3 days a week. Teachers will evaluate the lessons that are best suited for the face-to-face instruction and the distance learning environment. Students will engage in 1,200 minutes weekly of core academic instruction using our district-adopted curriculum. Dismissal for the day will be prior to lunch. Music, PE, and library will be instructed online at various times during the week. As mentioned previously, specially designed professional learning will be offered to support our staff. The hybrid schedule is designed to have half of the students on campus Monday, Tuesday. This would be our group A, and half of the students on campus Thursday, Friday. This would be our group B. In the afternoons, teachers will offer online office hours. This time could be used for small group instruction, drop-in time for parents and guardians, or the opportunity for one-on-one intervention or specific services to support our students. This is just to name a few examples. Preschool would continue to have their AM and PM program on an AB schedule. Wednesday is designated as our deep cleaning day for all elementary sites. Teachers would still have office hours for students and families, as well as time for preparation of lessons and collaboration with colleagues. Staff meetings and professional learning community meetings will be held on every other Wednesday. And now I'll turn it over to Dr. Lawrence.
Thank you. I'll begin with the middle school hybrid traditional schedule. Using this schedule, students would attend classes twice a week at 80 minutes a period. The students would receive each period direct instruction or engage in labs and receive guidance on the work they will work on during their online sessions. In this schedule, period 1 is extended by 10 minutes for announcements. Students will be separated into 2 groups, A and B, to lower the class size. Students would attend school 3 periods a day, allowing for less transition during the passing period. Also at the middle school level, students have a double period of either English language arts or another core content area, depending on the school site's focus. This allows for even less transition between classes as they would remain with the same teacher. While Group A is on campus for direct instruction, Group B will work online completing their assigned work. PE for middle school would be conducted online as a 7th period online course, taking the days the student is working online. In this model, Group A will attend school Monday, Tuesday, and Group B Thursday, Friday. The classes can be cleaned after lunch daily and include deeper cleaning on Wednesdays. Each teacher would be assigned an advisory or homeroom class to engage in social emotional learning, student support, and check-ins with students. The teachers would engage in advisory classes twice a week during the days when students are online. Next slide, please. For the high school traditional hybrid model, using this schedule, high school students would attend classes twice a week at 85 minutes a period. Students would attend 3 periods a day and would transition less between periods. The students would also receive direct instruction or engage in labs and receive guidance on the work they will work on during the online sessions. For example, when Group A is on campus for direct instruction, Group B will work online completing their assigned work. This schedule would operate on a traditional semester schedule with year-long classes for periods 1 through 6. This schedule would more easily convert back to a traditional campus schedule if school is called back in session without restrictions. Students would engage in online advisory class work, the same as what was presented in middle school. Clubs and honor society meetings would initially take place online as well. I will now reintroduce to you Superintendent Vitale.
Thank you, everyone, for your presentations, and thank everyone who was involved in the meetings with staff in our work groups, the hundreds of people that were involved with that, and the thousands of parents and guardians that participated in our surveys and our meetings. You can see that this has been an all hands on deck approach, as this very unprecedented situation requires all of us to work together. And this is certainly an example of that. And I just appreciate all the work that everyone has done. What you see on this slide is the current guidance from the California Department of Public Health. And these are basically the outline of all the criteria we must be following according to the Department of Public Health. So on the next slide, what that really kind of does is put that in a language that we can all understand. So what is it that we really know? And I want to say that things, as everyone has been paying attention, are changing daily. And Literally, we get different kinds of guidance almost on a weekly basis, and we're staying as agile as possible to adjust to those changes. So we know that in-person instruction will look different. We know that lower risk and higher risk, and I'm going to define those for you on the next slide, must be considered. We know that we're required to do some type of symptom checking for employees and for students. We know that people need to stay home if they're sick. We know that we need to stay home an extended time if we're exposed to COVID. Face coverings are being encouraged and in fact now are being mandated in the state of California. Physical distancing measures are in place, 6 foot physical distancing. And we all must continue to, I'm hoping, just teach the little ones the hand washing and the sanitizing. I hope we've all become very accustomed to singing the happy birthday song a couple of times to wash our hands. But we must continue that with especially our small kids, but I would say all people. And of course, we must have increased cleaning measures. And what we presented to you have all of those things in place. On the next slide, this is current guidance. This is actual language from, am I on mute? No, I'm good. Okay. From the Center for Disease Control, because I was saying a lot of really great things. Okay. This is directly from the Center for Disease Control, and it defines what lower risk is, more risk, and highest risk. So you can see that low risk is students and teachers engage in virtual only classes, activities, and events. That's what we basically did in the fall. That was the lowest risk that we could engage in. If you want to have more risk, you can have small in-person classes. And this is basically our hybrid model that we presented to the board tonight, with students in cohorts being on campus a couple of days a week together. Then we do deep cleaning and another cohort arrives. So that we assume more risk. And then of course, the highest risk is full-size in-person classes, activities and events where students are not spaced, they share the classroom, materials and supplies, and they mix between classrooms and activities. And that was not a model that we presented to the board tonight. And on the next slide, this is the California Resilience Roadmap. This was as of June 18th. This is the most recent version, and we are still in stage 2, which is lower risk for workplaces. It gets very confusing as things are opening up, but right now we are still in stage 2, which still recommends social distancing, face masks, and of course, extensive sanitary compliance with not only our own personal selves, but the spaces that we're in. The next slide shows the Center for Disease Control decision tree. And this basically helps our decision making on when and how we can open up. And should we consider opening up? So it really walks us through the decision making. And if we answer yes to these questions, then we can open up. So I think it's worth it to take a few minutes to just look at this. So in the first column, you have, will we be able to follow state and local orders? Are we ready to protect children and employees at high risk for severe illness? Are we able to screen students and employees upon arrival? If we are able to do those things, we can move to the next column. If we are not able to do those things, we are not to open. Let's assume we're able to do those things and we move to the next column. Our recommended health and safety actions in place to promote healthy hygiene, hand washing, employees wearing a cloth face covering, cleaning and disinfecting, and encouraging social distancing through increased spacing, small groups, and limited mixing between groups. And training employees in health and safety protocols, which we told you we did have a process for. If we're able to do those things, then we can go to the next column. Have we developed and implemented procedures to check for signs and symptoms of students and employees daily upon arrival? Are we encouraging anyone sick to stay home? Do we have a plan for students or employees who get sick? Are we regularly communicating and monitoring developments with local authorities, employees, families regarding cases, exposures, and updates to policies and procedures? Are we able to monitor students and employees' absences and have flexible leave policies and practices? And are we ready to consult with health authorities if there are cases in the facility? If we're able to do those things, we can open up and monitor. As stated on the next slide is more guidance, and these are very long documents, especially the one from the California Department of Education. So this is one sentence, but I thought it was a very important sentence to share. The intent of that document is to be a guide for local discussion on reopening schools. The California Department of Education and the state and the local governing bodies have made it clear that we are making these decisions locally. We are making these decisions for Oceanside Unified High School. That's why we had hundreds of people develop our plans, and we gathered input from thousands of stakeholders. And ultimately, this group will be deciding how we open up our schools safely for our students and for our staff. The California Department of Public Health states that these are guidelines and considerations based on the best available public health. And because I believe as superintendent, I represent all students and all employees, I believe that it is important to follow the health guidance set forward by these public entities like the California Department of Public Health, like the Center for Disease Control. But because this is a local decision, this is a collaborative process, and we work together to solve these issues. And we take input not only from all of our stakeholders, but it will be incredibly important for the Board of Education to give us guidance. My thoughts and clarity are that we're all interested in maintaining the safety of students and staff. So that is how we've made the decisions that we've made so far, and why we're bringing forward the schedules that we're bringing forward so far. So on the next slide, Dr. Richard Lawrence is going to talk about our new school, Surfside Educational Academy. Surfside Educational Academy has been in the works since August 2019. The timing of it is actually brilliant because it is structured to provide all of the models that we've been talking about. It was not created in a response to the COVID. It was created in a response to give our families choice and flexibility. So I would say we were about 10 months ahead of the game. So congratulations, Principal Franzen and the employees and staff who created this model. And Dr. Lawrence, I think you're going to talk just a little bit about Surfside Educational Academy.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Vitale. Yes, one of our proud new alternative education place for all of our students is Surfside Educational Academy, which was born out of a revisioning and looking at the needs of all of our students on our campuses. The Surfside Educational Academy will be with us through this pandemic and after this pandemic, serving all of our students for Oceanside Unified School District and all of those who need the supports. The program offers distance learning that is fully remote with a virtual check-in. All learning would occur online with the support of a teacher online. Secondly is a blended learning model, which is a hybrid model that students engage in both remote and online learning with in-person check-ins and continuous support from the teacher. And then also there is a direct instruction model where students would attend 3 to 5 courses per day on site, and this would be dependent on health guidance. What is important to note is all these courses are taught by teachers who have years of experience working with students in both a distance, online, and blended learning environment. They're willing, ready, and able to accept all students who need the support, and they're excited to have our students attend. Thank you. And now, Superintendent Vitale for the closing of this presentation.
Go Sharks. Go Sharks. Thank you so much, Dr. Lawrence. Appreciate that. So where this all ends up is at our July 21st board meeting, what we intend on bringing you are schedules for your consideration. Tonight, we're not asking you to make any decisions. We're interested in hearing your thoughts, Board of Education thoughts, additional thoughts from the community, and take any direction that you might want to give us. We have heard, just like many other people have, about what other districts are considering. And I called several superintendents today and talked to them about what they were considering. And not many of them have said this is actually what we're doing, but they're planning for various scenarios. But what I would remind everyone is that this is a local decision. Our local priorities will drive this decision making. One of the priorities I stated was safety for students and staff and following the health orders. Of course, we have decisions to make if we don't want to follow the health orders. But I also think that we put ourselves at risk of if we don't follow health orders, of getting directives from health officials that we might need to take another course of action, like shutting down 100%. So that's why we believe at this time the hybrid models do serve our students' needs and our staff's needs of safety. But we are very open if there's a district who absolutely learns how to 100% open up with safety in mind, or if we learn how to do that, and if we can find a way to do that, we will. And we want to hear from the Board of Education. We're not asking for a decision tonight. We are open to any and all questions and concerns. And what I'll say just from the get-go is if we don't have your answer tonight, we will look for it. So please accept, we might not have the answer to your question tonight, board members, but we will research it and we will get back to you. We are developing a new frequently asked questions, and we're going to be deploying our reopening website tomorrow. This presentation will be on that website, along with the communication we're going to send to all stakeholders. And our new FAQ will be really facilitating questions about reopening. So please stay engaged with us and look to that website for future information. But again, our next board meeting where we will be bringing considerations and recommendations back to the board is July 21st. The reason we're waiting that long is because things might change. So please know that we're still preparing, but we just want to be agile. So at this time, board, we are all panel members are open to questions, thoughts, concerns, directions. Public comment? Yes, public comment.
Yeah.
I'd like to hear from the public.
Yes.
Great. Let's do that. Can you guys hear me through this right now? Okay, great. Let's do the public comment. And how many speakers do we have?
On this item, we have 4.
4 on this? Okay, great. Go ahead and call out the name. Remember, for guidance for public's comments, I know everyone's probably read that in the procedures we've had you go through on this, but the limitation is up to 3 minutes. And please be direct. And on this one, it is a comment on our reopening plans. And so that's the topic that we will be hearing right now from you. But please keep your comments to 3 minutes. All right, Ann?
Todd Madison.
Hi. First, I just want to say thanks to the district for the.
Can't hear you, Todd.
Oh,
yes, I can. Yes, I can.
You okay?
I can hear you.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. First, thanks to the district for the exceptional effort they put into making plans for reopening. I've never seen such an exhaustive look at this, and this is awesome. As you all know, I've been a parent advocate here for a while now. I've been skeptical at times, but this time I think they've done the best job possible. I expressed some concerns a few weeks ago. The district took the ball and ran with it very well. The meetings I went to were very well run. The information was great, small enough so parents had plenty of time to give their input and discuss. These meetings should really be a model for how it's done in Oceanside as well as other districts in the future. I've spoken to some administrators as well who said they certainly heard things back from parents that we'd be taking back into development of the plan. And we've seen that just now. There was a great deal of thought put into it. What we saw showed that. I can't really imagine a better plan that balances the different concerns of parents, the school district, teachers, everyone involved. One small thing though, on the secondary hybrid model, I don't understand why we need to close early as well as all day on Wednesday for cleaning. Cleaning is good, but I don't quite understand why we would need to reduce the instructional time to do that. As a parent recommended in my meeting, that could certainly be done at night. If there were challenges for custodial time, I'd recommend hiring an outsourced janitorial company. I have a friend who runs one. He and I discussed, it seems like something that they could get some helpers to help in and not have to close down the schools for such a long period of time to do. If budget is an issue, I can't imagine a part-time janitorial help from a private company would be very expensive, not in comparison to losing more than a day of instruction every week. I think parents would like to see what options we can come up with on that didn't involve that loss of learning. But that's a small issue. I think overall the plan is just awesome. So while we're on the topic of parent involvement, in the interest of disclosure, I should mention I'll be running for school board this fall, District 5, the Wildcat Corridor. I know the board has some parents on it now, but there can never be enough parent involvement in our schools. I'd like to add to that, perhaps a different perspective. Kids need to come first in Oceanside. I think I can help do that. Anyone interested in following me is welcome to sign up at toddforkids.com or follow my Facebook page at toddforkids.com. I'm planning on doing as much as I can to get parent feedback on what's important to them. I want to hear from as many OUSD parents as possible. That's Todd4kids.com, Kids First in Oceanside. Thanks a lot.
Mr. Madison, we appreciate your comments that were on the topic of our models moving forward to reopening the schools. But under that topic, it is inappropriate for you to speak about any other topic, your campaign or anything else. So please follow the rules. I know you pay attention to our rules quite a bit, and you give us a lot of comment on those rules quite a bit. So please pay attention to your appropriate public comment times and topics. It's not a campaign forum at this point in time and in this venue. With that, we'll have the next public speaker. Dan?
Desiree Mellor.
Desiree, you're muted. You're going to need to unmute so you can speak.
Oh, my apologies. Thank you so much. So I did want to also compliment your presentation so far. I was really thrilled to see how much work has gone into it. I have friends in other states and other cities, and what you are doing for our community is so far above and beyond what I'm seeing in other places. So I do want to thank you for that. As a parent, I did have a couple of concerns, and it just kind of stems from how do you respect parents' rights while still doing what's best for the community? When I attended the small meetings, it was overwhelming. We're going to do what's safe for the kids, which is what I've seen echoed here. But for an example, there was a parent who said, what if I don't want my child's temperature taken? And that stood out to me. So my question to you moving forward is, again, right now masks are being mandated. And you said your first two essential guidelines were low risk to staff and students and to follow the CDC and local guidelines. And we're asking our teachers to take a huge burden to be in the presence of these students during this pandemic. And as parents, we need these teachers. We need them to be safe more than we need our kids, if anything. We need them to be safe. So as the school board, are you prepared to enforce those guidelines since you're offering 100% social distancing as a backup for parents who don't agree with them? And if you're not prepared to enforce those guidelines, do you accept the liability to the staff and students who could be harmed by not doing so?
Thank you for your comments. We'll take that on board. I appreciate it. Next speaker. Thank you.
Monica.
While we're looking for our next public speaker, I just want to remind everyone that in public comments, it's a public comment. And so when you're asking questions, we're writing those questions down and we will provide those in our FAQ, and we'll work to get those responses up as soon as possible. And please feel free to keep those questions coming even after we develop the FAQ, because it will be an ongoing document.
Great point. Wonderful. Do we have should we go on to the next speaker and try to? Okay. let's go with the Monica who's there.
We have a public comment card from someone that just listed their first name as Monica. If you are that person that put in that public comment card, will you hit the raise hand? Thank you.
Let's go up to the next one, Ann. And we'll try and connect with Monica, or you give us a call tomorrow sometime or another, and we'll take your comments in as best we can tomorrow. If we can't get you tonight, if we dropped you or something, appreciate that. Staff will take your comments.
Molly Ellis.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay, that was the folks who gave public comments in part of our system and the way we have to approach it ahead of time to get names submitted to us so we can contact you. We appreciate everyone's input, and we're going to discuss it now amongst the board members. And as the superintendent said as well, please know that we're going to be sending out some documents tomorrow that you mentioned, and you could continue with your questions and follow up. And we're going to be active over the next month here in our interchange with you guys to come to a solution as how we're going to and a decision as to how school will look in coming August. So with that, I would open it up to board discussion.
Thank you. I'd like to compliment everyone who took the time to listen tonight. And I also would like to thank parents who have called us, emailed us. We hear you. We are very, very, very much, as you heard tonight, attempting to move in the direction that's best for all of our students. I do have a concern on basically page 7 of the document instructional education technology, when we talk about Google Classroom. Will that be a requirement for every teacher to use that as a platform? Because I know this summer, if not in this district, other districts, teachers have been using various platforms in terms of delivering instruction, and it's been somewhat confusing. So will that be absolute mandatory so that we do have consistency in learning for our students?
Yes. So we'll have two LMSs, two learning management systems, for the 2021 year. For kindergarten through second grade is a system called Seesaw, for the kids to manipulate and the teachers to interface with children. And then we did a survey with elementary and secondary teachers looking for what they wanted in a learning management system. And a Google Classroom was stated by 3 out of 4 people on that survey that it would meet their needs as far as what they needed to deliver instruction. So what we will do this year is we will provide professional learning around Google Classroom. There are no mandates that I know of. We certainly from the district office would not mandate that. What we want to do is make it available, make training, professional learning available, help people with best practices, and just assist them in facilitating with their students. But the word requirement, I don't think, is introduced into the conversation.
Other board members have some comments or
I have
some
a
suggestions
question.
for staff or direction and what they'd like to see in addition to the good work they've done? Raquel.
I have a question. I know we were talking about C and the different options that they offer. Do they have any type of setup, or are they prepared to take any SPED students as far as if parents want that type of program or any of those programs? Do they offer anything for them there at C? Is there anything set up, or is there something that we're looking at in the future for that also?
At Surfside. Dr. Lawrence, do you want to take that question? Or Jim Wood? And do you want to repeat the question, Trustee Alvarez? You're basically asking is, do we offer services for students with IEPs at Surfside Educational Academy? Right. And I would say the answer to that question is yes. And I would give Jim Wood or Richard Lawrence the opportunity to elaborate on that answer.
Right. And to what extent of the IEPs are we looking? Like, is it just moderate, or is it, just so what do we offer, or what are we looking to offer at what point are we doing it?
Yep.
Dr. Lawrence, would you like to
elaborate?
Go ahead. What we do is look at it that between a transition.
Richard, I think you're talking. Oh, sorry.
We would look at it from a transition point of when the student is transitioning from their traditional school going to CEAS Academy, Surfside Educational Academy, to determine whether that is the right environment for them. So that will be done through an IEP process, and there will be supports made depending on if that is the right space or right venue, or what adjustments do we need to make in instruction to accommodate the needs of the student. Mr. Wood can also expand upon that as well.
So currently we do have students who attend. It really is based on IEP team decisions. So the EDCO does require that we look at different options for students and offer a continuum of services. And one of those services might be the programs offered through Surfside Academy. So we do have students there, and Principal Franzen has reached out to have further discussions about what that might look like for students with disabilities and how we can increase our ability to serve students with disabilities.
So I am understanding that students with IEPs can attend there, and that's K through 12, correct? It's not just high school only or any level. We're not just targeting just certain areas. It's K through 12.
Correct.
Thank you.
I have a quick question about TK. I didn't hear anything mentioned about transition kinder.
Vicki, I know we had a work group on transitional kindergarten, and do you want to speak to that a little bit?
We did have a team, Dr. Begin, who was looking at our transitional kindergarten program and the standards and expectations and how we would align with our kinder program. And so the schedule that we are proposing, or that came from that work group, was in alignment with the kinder schedule. If you have program specifics you would like to know about, please let me know. Is it more the scheduling that you were asking about?
No, I just wanted to know. I just didn't hear them mentioned, so.
Absolutely. We had, I believe, 5 TK teachers on our team and providing input.
All right, thank you. And then I have another question, or it could be part of the broader issue. I know we don't have answers for everything just as yet with the shifting. This is a pretty comprehensive plan. to have a safe learning environment for our students. This is going to take time for teachers to put this together and staff to put it together and for parents to digest. Are we having teachers work over the summer, or how's this going to impact the workload of our, not just teachers, but our staff?
So we started the work groups in May to try and get our best thinking so that people could go away and have a vacation and have a summer. So our teachers are getting to have a summer and a vacation, and many of our administrators will still continue to be engaged in this work. Right now, this is our best thinking. We're going to continue the work, and as things change and as needed, we'll bring people back. Right now, what we're really asking teachers to do is we're offering different kinds of professional development for them to participate in, if they choose to do that. But we really want to try and give people some time off. So that's why we engaged in this work so intensely before school was out. And we have a good, solid thinking plan right now. And as we need to make adjustments, we will. And as we need to ask people if they will be engaged in further conversations, we will. We'll see what changes between now and July 21st. And as administrators, we're still I'm in constant communication with other superintendents around the county and actually around the state and actually around the country, listening and learning to them. If we hear about any really great ideas or any real possible options, we will re-engage with our associations to see what kinds of changes we might need to make. So that was a long answer, but I hope it met the spirit of your question.
Okay, and then my last question, I'm sorry, I'm hogging time here, guys. Well, it's on the tip of my tongue, is the after school care. So as a parent, just hearing the schedule kind of gave me some anxiety about how am I going to work out my work schedule, have supervision for my child. What are we doing with our after school partners? And are they going to be practicing the same rigorous safety?
Yes, Dr. Lovey will speak to that. And I want to share with you that it gives us anxiety too. That's the thing that we worry about the most. The thing that we heard from our parents and guardians, especially, was that they wanted their K-5 students in school and they were very concerned about learning loss. And, we worry too about the early out. There were a couple of reasons for that, as I understood from the work groups. Part of it was the nutrition services process and the grab and go lunch. Part of it was giving teachers the time because we didn't just want to react anymore to distance learning. We want to be very good at it and very good at hybrid learning. So they would need additional time to plan, additional time to collaborate with one another. But we are concerned about that. And so Dr. Levy and her team have been working on that. And she will share with us their current thinking with that.
Thank you, Dr. Vitale. Dr. Begin and board, one of the things that we do know is that the after school programs that we already have in place, our ACES 21st Century, are fully funded for next year. Currently, those grant funded programs are staffed and have capacity for about 80 students on each elementary school site. With social distancing and current staffing, with the other ideas, would be around 40 students. So one of the things we want to think about is how can we provide as much support to families as possible, and at the same time still be focusing on that rigorous hand washing, cleaning, and physical distancing, and providing activities that engage students so that it's more of a support to their extended learning instead of just a place for them to go. So we're working with our after school providers. We wanted to make sure we had looked at our core program during the day. And now we're going to be reaching out to our service providers and talking with them and seeing what their ideas are. Because one thing that this process has really taught us is the smartest person in the room is the room. So bringing more people together, we get more ideas and more ability to address the needs as they come forward. So we'll be working with our providers.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Eric, do you have any?
Yeah,
You want to share that?
I have 1,000.
All right, good deal.
So first of all, thank you to everyone who participated in this, in the work groups. I know I was gathering gray hairs during the last 3 months, juggling children and work and dealing with the overwhelming sense of frustration that the entire community has felt, and just all of it together. So thank you for taking the time out of all of the things that you were doing to work on this plan. It is extremely comprehensive. My first question is, how are we looking at equity throughout this entire document? So we talked about needing to get internet access to students and families. And right now, a big thing that we're doing is relying on our local providers to hook up families, but there are barriers to families that may not have all the documentation that they're asking for. They may not have. They may not be able to get the homeless families, the ones that are in transition between homes. So there's all kinds of barriers to families getting hooked up. So what are we doing to explore, to look into? We talked about hotspots. Is there a pipeline for that for us to order? Is there an option for offering weekend Wi-Fi spots near campuses? I mean, I would just ask, like, what are we thinking in that area, and also, where can we explore further in that area?
That obviously is the probably the number one concern of everybody, because it's the biggest challenge. We have quotes from at least 3 different providers for what hotspots would cost us. We're also going to look into the possibility of some other financial models about how we get houses connected. There's nothing that's off the table right now. And we also know that we have about 30 days to get it figured out, because we got to get orders in the pipeline. The backlog right now for electronics in general is obnoxious. So we have to really get things figured out here. Probably in the next 20 days would be even better. But we're looking at all of the things that you mentioned. The only thing that we really have taken off the board is the Wi-Fi wired buses and parking them in neighborhoods. That's just not economically feasible, just from a maintenance standpoint, a management standpoint. But all of the things that you mentioned, plus a little bit more, are being considered right now, and we just have to bring together a few key people and gather our data, make some tough decisions about what that looks like, and then move forward from there.
So in that space, if we were to be on the hybrid model where there are essentially 2 days of digital work that students are working through, what would it take for us to have open space on Saturdays and Wi-Fi available to families and students that needed it?
That's something that falls under we don't have an answer for that question right now, but we will definitely be able to explore that.
Okay.
And yeah, I would add that it would always be possible for people to use the Wi-Fi on weekends. Anytime they're close to a building, that's always the possibility. If it was something that we structured, then we would need to staff it. And if we staff it, we would need to fund it. And we'll be talking about the budget later on. But if people use our Wi-Fi, especially students, if they're near buildings, I would say that it's probably always accessible to them within a certain range. But again, if we structure or sanction, we would need to fund that. So that is a possibility that we could consider. We haven't costed anything like that out, but we certainly could.
Okay, so looking at Yeah. So looking at grading, that, and it kind of ties into the internet thing. And this isn't maybe a directed question, but this is just an overall concern that I want to make sure is on the radar. I know we have the most brilliant minds and our team's amazing, but grading was a challenge this time because we had to shift over to distance learning. There's a possibility that we're shifting in and out of distance learning, that we're shifting in and out of hybrid models, that we're in the school, and then we have to move in and out. So we should have a very robust grading policy that is able to shift with these different environments. And so I'm just kind of planting a flag in that for us to be thinking about. And I know Mercedes is, and if she wants to share some of her thoughts on that.
Thank you, Trustee Joyce. Grading was definitely a topic that came up in our parent meetings and in our work groups. And we absolutely felt that as we moved so quickly into distance learning and the delays that we might have had with our ability to launch devices to everyone, that having grading not be punitive at this time was absolutely the 100% right thing to do. Now, with more time and an on ramp onto the fall, our parents very clearly said they wanted to have grading. Our teachers talked about grading. When we think about grading, traditionally we always think about it as this idea as a measure of where students are at. We also know that grades also serve as a purpose of a motivator and a way for people to be able to see their achievements reflected. So clearly we want to make sure we do that we do have grading. What we also found is as time went on and we were able to connect with under the leadership of Dr. Sparks and our site principals and assistant principals, we got to the point where we had all but 15 students who had been located, and that was directly related to the launching of the 5,400 devices that we put out into the community. So we know that we are able to bridge that divide and offer that opportunity. So we know that grading will be important, as will be attendance monitoring, because what we feel is that if we continue to monitor where the students are at and we find out what those challenges are and we provide those services to students, then everything else will work out for them. So that we're definitely thinking deeply about that, but we do know that parents, families, and teachers have said that they do want to have grades. So we'll be looking at that, but we want to make sure, as always, that it is in a compassionate way that really reflects what students know.
Thank you. Okay, 998. I understand the reasoning for the models that are put forward. I have grave concerns about special education students' ability to progress. And that's a very broad brush. There are a range of students that have special needs, but our moderately and high impacted special ed students, students with special needs, I have really large concerns about them being able to progress in a curriculum when they have such limited access to people. And so I think just another flag to place in would be that if we can accommodate our most impacted students on a campus safely, then I think we should be, I'd like to put it to the board to be considering that we prioritize those students. And likewise, we think about our district as in the way that we have to think about all the students that truly need to be interpersonal connection, interpersonal learning, like our K2 students, our students with special needs, our adult transition program. I just think I'd really like to see us honing in on those students and offering services as equitably as we possibly can.
Trustee Joyce, I'd say that I share those concerns, and we have had conversations about what this might look like through the IEP process, through developing. I'm sorry. Oh, through developing offers of faith and what that looks like. How do we know what will support students in their learning and provide educational benefit? So once we develop a model for what school may look like, we can start to address those processes to ensure that all of our students have the access that they need to educational services and to receive educational benefit. So thank you for bringing that up.
And just to voice one more thing within that realm, because it is something I'm in every day. Those services are individualized, right? So our model should be flexible to those students' needs, and it sounds like that's the work that you're doing. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
I mean, I got something I can throw there. Yeah,
I got lots of questions.
Well,
So
we got a long meeting. Go for it.
So just thinking, this would be directed to Todd McAteer. I have a question about teachers, employees that are at high risk, health issues, very sensitive topic. How are we identifying them and ensuring them that they have privacy?
A good question, Dr. Begin. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, we did have a conversation about that, and we haven't acted on it, but our thought is to provide a secure survey out to our employees so that we could get the information that we need to address those types of concerns without any additional information that would be a HIPAA violation for confidentiality. But our thought is that those employees that do have particular physical concerns or fall under the protection of being 65 and over may want to respond to our survey so that we can look at is it a question of an accommodation that they need or pure distancing and being away from students altogether, and what level of response the district could provide in terms of an employment position for them.
Thanks for that response. And so to piggyback on that, how are we identifying, or what's the process for students that have high medical needs or that need 100% distance learning?
Jim or Mercedes, do you want to take that? Right, might not be. Medically fragile students, Mercedes, I know that's something that you've talked about often.
Yeah, so we're definitely thinking about the importance of providing the supports to our medically fragile students. And our parents did talk about this as well. So one of the things I know that Trustee Alvarez asked about was with the Surfside Academy and providing those supports. One thing we've learned in the last 3 months is that we have a lot more options and tools to provide services than we thought. So as Mr. Wood talked about, we have some platforms that can be used for virtual speech therapy that we're exploring this year with our extended school year. And we're going to be looking at how we can really enhance the virtual delivery of instruction so that our medically fragile students will have the supports they need. At the same time, all of our students are entitled to a free public education, and we want to make sure that we're following health plans. So like many students, when we were in school 100% in real life, we would create specialized health plans with the help of our nurses. That's something we would be looking at in an individual way as well. Some of the guidance we've seen is using of face shields for our students who are deaf and hard of hearing, so that way they can see lips and read lips to help with communication. We've been looking at what kind of PPE would be most appropriate. And of course, if a student had a breathing concern, masks would of course not be required of that student. So we definitely would take it individually and create the health plans that I know we've already had in place with the support of our health providers, which are our RNs, who are really terrific and have been on the cutting edge of this entire program.
Thank you, Stacy. I want to just commend staff for the great work of putting this together. and the folks who've been out here listening to this, I would leave you with one major overarching sentiment, I guess, that we've heard from everybody is that if there's any way you can bring, at least elementary kids back to 100% on school come August on the school site, that would be wonderful. If we could find some way to accomplish that, and if staff can stay open to those options as you're dealing with the health departments and the health regulations and our other jurisdictions around that are pushing the envelope, provided that we stay within the safety bounds of what the Department of Health directs us. It would be wonderful. We could get 100% kids back. 100% kids back to school on site 5 days a week, 5 days whatever levels in whatever levels we. I know that's not where we're at right now, but I do hope staff can look at that issue.
So, following all safety guidelines, you'd like us to engage, I'll call it moonshot thinking, and some moonshot thinking just to see if there are any ways that we can bring back K-5 following all safety guidelines.
Yes, absolutely. That would be fantastic. I wish you would do that.
I hope we can.
All
We'll
right.
look into it for sure.
Any other comments? Yes, Eric.
Okay, so
996.
professional learning is something that was brought up through the presentation. Are we considering, or were there any recommendations on starting late in order to give time? So doing online learning for the first couple weeks of the school year to give staff time to get trained on all the amazing devices and software and programs and the new pedagogical procedures that we've talked about, because we're not just throwing stuff online. They're actually changing the way we teach because we haven't been so structured as, let's see, what was it? The possible learning format for secondary was warm up, direct instruction, independent practice, direct instruction assessment, and wrap up. Teaching has changed so much since we were in a format that looked like that. There's some major shifts that we have to consider in order to provide high quality teaching.
So Dr. Lovey, in a moment, will speak to professional development considerations. What we do know about the school calendar and what we recently learned about budget issues is that we've not been given any flexibility on the number of days. So the number of instructional days is still 180. And any changes to our calendar would need to be negotiated with our associations. So we haven't really talked about changes to the calendar, but we have talked about professional development. And Mercedes, do you want to share some of the latest thinking about that? And even possibly some of the offerings that we have going on this summer.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Vitale, and thank you for the question. So we were very excited because we invited teachers to come together to share their thinking in both the secondary and elementary. What have we learned over the last 3 months? And what we know a lot about best practices and about companies that are very agile. When you have a critical incident, you do the post-incident debrief. What have we learned and what do we know? And so we brought together about 100 teachers to think about what we've learned about distance learning, which again focuses on also part of our hybrid learning. So what we found in that is that teachers have done a great job of being agile, flexible, and creative. And what we need to do is systematize it. So our ed tech TOSAs, our instructional TOSAs, our ESS team produced quite a bit of synchronistic, asynchronistic content for people to use. And teachers also created a ton of content and a ton of strategies for people to use. What we found is that we need to make sure that we're all aware of these great practices and build our capacity together as a community. So we're planning on creating that space for teachers to teach each other, for principals to come together and collaborate so that we can identify what are those things that are going to be most effective. We also have options for teachers to be able to review some online learning modules, as well as have coaching with our TOSAs. So we've got a lot of plans. Mrs. Gravelin, Mr. Wood, Dr. Lawrence, Dr. Sparks, myself, and the rest of the ESS team is really thinking about what are going to be the highest level strategies, and how do we deploy things in just-in-time learning. So because what we do know is that, at least for me, and I'm sure many of you experienced this, in the beginning there was so much coming at us, it was just too much. So we want to curate the learning experiences, provide teachers with choices so that it meets their needs in time to address the needs of the students. So we're working on a comprehensive plan that will address that, because we absolutely agree. Mr. Moon and I have definitely had this conversation that this is an opportunity to transform things and transform education in a way that we haven't seen before. So we're taking advantage of that opportunity through our professional learning process.
Thank you.
Okay. A couple of things. Again, amazing work in putting all this together, and all the work that a team put into getting this done. But I think my biggest concern too is consistency throughout all the schools. I mean, so many times we say we're going to do things one way, and then different schools and different things happen at different locations. And so the consistency would have to be there throughout the whole program so that everybody's on the same page, because again, this is all new, and with safety being the priority in everything that we're doing right now, I think we need to also remember that the consistency in how we do everything and how everything is working needs to be a priority as well. Are we looking at formats and being able to make sure that happens throughout all of our schools is one of my biggest things right now, that making sure that does happen for all of for K-12, obviously. Or
Mercedes, Vicky, Richard, or Greg, I think you can speak to that. That is something that did come up quite a bit in the work groups and also in the parent guardian meetings. Consistency for the digital environments was something that came through loud and clear. And really, it was because parents were having to navigate various platforms, and it was very challenging for them. And I even have friends who are educators with children, and they were having to navigate various systems for their own children, and it was very hard for them to keep track of things. So that was one thing that bubbled up, absolutely. So as far as the digital platforms, we are looking at consistency across all schools. And I think maybe Mercedes, Richard, or Vicky, if you want to talk about, I think there's more about maybe the structure of instruction, maybe the expectations for the face-to-face engagement, what that looks like. Also the in-class time. I know we haven't fleshed that out completely, but I know that the work groups had thoughts and many things came up through the parent guardian meetings.
Yes, absolutely. When we've been working with our teachers, again, like we said, in 3 days, we all were putting things together. So that absolutely did result in a lot of variation. And so, as you know, one of the things that we've been doing under Dr. Vitale's leadership is to really looking at this 80-20 model, so that 80% of what we do is going to be consistent across grade levels. And this is kind of what we think about as a franchise. 20% will be the local flavor. So if you think about your favorite franchise, be it Starbucks, I happen to love Starbucks. When you go to Starbucks, you will find that 80% of what your experience will be in common, but 20% will be locally derived. So what we want to do is be able to work with our teachers to identify the consistent practices that we can say, these are the practices we have in Oceanside Unified School District, build that in collaboration with our teachers and our principals, and then continue to refine that so that there is a certain brand that we can put forward for Oceanside Unified School District. And I think Mr. Moon talked about, we talked about Seesaw as an opportunity for one platform. We talked about Google Classroom as an opportunity, and also Mr. Jennings for communication, the Blackboard platform moving into the fall, so that we can stay with a few platforms and really bring all of those things together so that it's a more manageable thing. But that's not to take anything away from our teachers and our principals who just, pulled it together and made it happen. And now that we have, again, more time for an on-ramp, we're going to definitely be looking at that and increasing our consistency there.
I'd like to expand on that just a little bit. Our Director of Communications, Matthew Jennings, has really been working to streamline us into one communication platform. And Matthew, I'd like you to speak to that. That platform is Blackboard. It has many I call them little tricks that it does. And so Matthew, will you please share some of those amazing things that can happen in Blackboard as a communication tool for our staff, for our families, and please share all the things that it does, that it can help teachers with communication and it can help our parents and guardians with communication. So please just share all of the things that we have it doing right now.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Vitale. Good evening, board and attendees. Yes, Blackboard, in an effort to reduce fragmentation and systems across the district, we have a gold standard, so to speak, through our district communication system, which is called Blackboard. We are able to text, email, and call all of our families, staff, students that we have our email addresses for, so secondary level students, very easily. So teachers can use the tool to email out lessons with attachments. You can send out text reminders of things with links to websites, phone calls, of course. And it is the system that our district office uses for all of our district notifications. All of our attendance calls go through that. It is the same system that our principals and administrators out at the school sites use, which is excellent. There is nothing for parents to download. There's nothing they have to opt into. It connects seamlessly with our student database system, which is Aries, and imports the information that way so that it's seamless for parents. They receive text, they receive email, they receive phone calls. One great thing about that is that next year, Blackboard will be rolling out two-way communication as an option, which is really fantastic. So we're looking forward to that. What's so important and critical about the adoption of standard is that it reduces the fragmentation that we see across schools or across even classrooms. For example, you may have a parent with 3 kids. I have 2 kids myself. One teacher uses Bloom's, the other teacher uses Remind, which means if I want to keep up with what's going on in my children's classrooms personally, I have to have 2 separate apps downloaded on my phone, on my device, and it makes it more difficult. And honestly, I just don't do it because it's something I have to engage in. I have to have space on my phone. Now I'm tracking it in 2 different spaces, whereas with Blackboard, there is nothing for parents to download. However, in the future, we may be able to partner with Blackboard in having a mobile application for each one of our schools. It would be a branded mobile application for every single school. And then everything related to that scholar is in one space for that parent. If they want to know when the next PTA meeting is, they open that one mobile app for their kiddo's school. If they want to know when the next board meeting is, it would be in there. If they want to follow the social media feeds at their kiddo's schools, everything flows through there. Anything the teacher sends home via text or push notification shows up in that one space in the mobile app. Anything the school sends, anything the district sends. So it's a one-stop shop. Shows the kiddos' attendance, their grade levels, their assignments, their nutrition services, balances. It's really incredible. So that's also something we may look at in the future. But it's just about reducing that fragmentation and dependency on other systems that we don't manage as a district. We don't have control over things like Remind and Dojo and Blooms. And then one of the significant things that we are focused on is that all of our communication goes out in both English and Spanish. So that's a very big focus in the communications office, that we're also reaching all of our families that need to receive that communication in Spanish. Blackboard is very smart. If a family has indicated their home language is Spanish, when we send out communication, it gives them that communication in Spanish, which is really fantastic. And it does that automatically. So it does offer translation, which is great. So for teachers shooting out a quick text or a quick just notification out to families, or some communication that's pretty simple, it relies on Google Translate. So the kind of rule of thumb is if you can write at maybe a 5th grade reading level or lower, Google Translate will have a much better chance of getting the translation accurate. We know Google Translate's not 100% perfect. However, it is the standard which most other entities rely on. If you go to the DMV and you have the website translated, it's using Google Translate. The California Department of Motor Vehicles, the Department of Ed, Any other website essentially on earth that relies on translation, when you go to the top and click other languages, that's Google Translate. And that's what Blackboard uses. So it's not perfect, but we really rely on that and find that very valuable to our families. So I think I've probably covered that in exhaustion, but I'm very passionate about communication and all things that. So if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer those.
As always, we appreciate your vigor on the topic.
Thank you, Trustee.
I just want a comment for some parent out there probably thinking. We talked about the platforms earlier. What about the security involved? And
Mute.
unmute.
You got to unmute. Miller.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. We spoke earlier about the consistency of the platforms we're using, and I'm sure many parents are concerned about the security involved in using like Blackboard, etc. Can you address that just to reassure everyone?
Mr. Moon or Mr. Jennings would love to address that security question. Not sure who the best person is. I'm going to go with Moon on security. And really how our filters work, I think, Greg, is how we can address that question. And also talk a little bit about, was it Content Keeper, the new thing that we're doing with Google? So talk a little bit about both of those again.
As far as security goes, we're moving more and more of our services to cloud-based services hosted by the vendors that we hire. So there was, we still have some legacy systems that we host on local servers, and the security of our local network has increased substantially through the purchase of a state-of-the-art firewall last year, and some practices we put in place. We have a top-notch network analyst. So I'm confident. We do penetration tests both in-house and external. So I'm confident in the local network. We also vet each vendor that we use. For example, Blackboard they host everything in the cloud there, as do many of our other services. Our Google services are hosted by Google. Our Aries student information system is hosted in the cloud by Aries. And so they're responsible for the security for each of their products and services. When we look to contract with them, we investigate that thoroughly to make sure that they run all the state of the art. And these companies have a much better opportunity and much better staffs to run state of the art security types of environments than we would, which is one reason we offload that task, or we are offloading that task, moving things to vendor hosted cloud based solutions. So security is not an issue at all. Dr. Talley asked me to speak a little bit about Content Keeper. Content Keeper rides on top of or inside of our network, and it is our web filter in order to be compliant with SIPA and COPA. It is a top-notch web filter. It's and they're very supportive. We've got it tuned pretty precisely now, so we can see all kinds of activity inside of our network. We're able to detect things, very, very rapidly. So we also know if children are wandering a little bit around the forest, that Content Keeper will alert us and help us to bring them back in. So security-wise, I think we're in pretty good shape.
Greg, will you also, additionally, as an educational institution, we believe in teaching and learning and Common Sense Media and the lessons that we've been engaging in and will engage in will also speak to that. So can you just share a little bit about some of the lessons involved with Common Sense Media? And I know you shared this a little bit earlier, but just as a reminder that we don't only rely on our systems, but we also rely on teaching proper use of the various systems.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. So systems can only do so much. They're just machines. Students present us with opportunities every day to help them learn, and they present us with opportunities to help us learn. Common Sense Media is a curriculum that's been out there for quite a few years. It's on about its third iteration now, its third upgrade. It's used for K-8 basically digital citizenship lessons. The lessons are they're precise, they're engaging, and we found in other places where we've used this that we actually help educate some of the educators as they're delivering these lessons to students. So looking at digital citizenship, not just from a safety and the bullying, but just how to conduct yourself online. If we're going to ask these children to spend part of their life online, then we need to help them understand how to navigate that territory, how to function correctly. So Common Sense Media is a no-cost, absolute great curriculum that can be used at the K-8 level to help all of our students learn how to live online, basically.
And Greg, while we have you, I have one more question about tech. So tech support was mentioned as a major. I mean, it could be a huge bottleneck for families, for staff, for everybody, because if we're all rushing into this space and then rushing out of this space, um, tech support is a huge consideration. Do we currently have the staff to meet the needs of the tech support needs should we have to go to distance learning in October or whenever?
No, that's a great question, and I truly do appreciate it. I think we learned quite a bit over the first 60 days after evacuation day. We we have we had some learnings from some of my staff that says they were working harder at home answering phones because we set up phones to ring at home for them, and they'd spend entire days on the phones, and they were answering. We had days where we'd have a few hundred tickets and maybe 100 125 phone calls, both in English and Spanish. So we set up multiple lines of support. We learned some things. Like I said, that first 60 days was a learning experience for sure. We learned some additional things 30 days after that, and I think we're better poised now. I believe we have adequate staffing. I really believe we have adequate staffing now. We need to look at how we effectively deploy systems that we already own so that we can just be. We know we were effective. Now we're going to look to move to efficient.
And I want to just say one thing as a follow-up. We offered that service both to students and staff, which was absolutely amazing. It wasn't just tech support for staff. And we are looking at additional ways to possibly optimize other support staff to be also helpful to students and staff with the various technologies. So we're actually looking outside the instructional technology department as well for that. So thank you for that question.
Thank you for all those staff members that were taking home calls for tech support. And then my last circled question. I saw mentioned site-based distance learning on the overall plan as a possible recommendation. So this would be an alternative to students going to Surfside Educational Academy and doing distance learning with a teacher at their school site. Is that something that is a firmed up recommendation, or is that something that we're having in our ether based on numbers? What are our considerations, staffing and space wise in that area now?
Thank you, Trustee Joyce. We are really at the point now of thinking about what all the implications are. As you know from our survey of parents, there were about 15% of our parents who said that they were pretty sure that they wanted distance learning. And what we do know so far is that will require us to have staff to serve them. One of the wonderings that we had was around, would this be something that would be site-based or would it be through Surfside? And so in talking to our teachers who've done it, we've got a couple of pros and cons to that, because we do know that people want to maintain their identity as a pirate. They want to maintain their identity as a Mission Dolphin or at Palm Quest or at Del Rio. So we're trying to figure out how we can marry those two things together, because that is an interest of our families. And but we also have to think about how that might be for our school reporting, for CalPads and other options. So it is in our thoughts, but we haven't really fully examined that just yet, but we do know that's an interest that is of our families.
Thank you. Any other questions? Any more? Don't hold back. We've been on this 2 hours plus, and we're still holding an audience too, so that's surprising.
All right. Well, I'll
So
go.
it must be good. Go. All right.
So, first and foremost, thank you to all our stakeholders. The input, expertise that was provided to put this plan together to make it comprehensive is huge. I work with 10 other school districts during my day job, and I haven't seen anything like this. So I'm very proud of Oceanside right now. The dedication to our students is commendable. We're all going to have to work together to get through these trying times. That means we're going to have to be flexible because the information is changing daily. I appreciate that we use the comprehensive guidance from the Department of Ed, from the County Office of Ed, from the County Public Health, and networking with other districts. I think that's huge that we do that as the landscape shifts. But as a parent, I wear that parent hat of a middle schooler. I'm going to have to be flexible and fluid as well. In that note, our district has to do what they can to support our parents and support our students, not just with the digital learning piece, that is important, but also how are we going to do childcare? How are we going to communicate to their employers that they have this type of schedule? And so we can get some flexibility from employers. I'm concerned about that too. I don't like to leave my middle schooler home for too long because that's dangerous. Anyways, I think this plan is very comprehensive. I support the hybrid model at this point in time today, knowing what we know about from the county public health and the guidelines. That may shift. We're going to have to help our families with childcare. I really appreciate that our communication is going to get more consistent with the ongoing two-way with our families and staff. I am extremely concerned about our staff and the overworking. I'm Zooming all day through work and I have this digital fatigue. It's just, you think it would be easier, but it is not. And I do not have a child at home every day. So our staff that have small children at home, this is going to be a challenge. And I'm not sure how we can do to support them. So any creative thoughts and ideas, I think we really need to look at that. But I just, safety is our number one priority. It should be. As a parent, it's my priority. I want my student to learn, but I want him to be in a safe environment. I know we have a lot of people, not just our students, but students have extended family at home, elders at home that may be susceptible. So I really want to make sure that we're limiting the amount of exposure and the risk for those students to take anything home to their families that could put them in jeopardy. So I don't think I can live with that as a board member if we don't stick to safety as our number one priority to guide us through this mess. So that's where I'm at.
Fantastic. Anyone else? It's great summary, Stacy. I appreciate it. Appreciate all the work by staff. We're going to take, this item was for information only, and we're going to take a 5-minute break. So don't go away unless you're done with us for the night, but we'll be back in about 5 minutes.
Yep.
We are back, everyone. Raquel, Eleanor, we're back in session. Well, yes, if you're muted or unmuted, you're on or not on, but if you're muted, you're fine. All right, we will move on now. That was a great discussion. Appreciate everybody listening to that presentation and our discussion about how we can get school back in order here and running this coming August. The next item on the agenda is item 7A, approval of contract agreement with digital schools. For the staff presentation.
Yes, thank you. We currently use digital schools as our resources management system. It's also integrated into our payroll, benefits, and fiscal services. And this system allows us to track and manage our personnel matters. This contract is our current contract has been updated to include a $50,000 savings through some negotiations with the corporation.
Great. Are there any questions of staff at the moment? Do we have a public comment on this, Ann?
Yes, we do. Todd Madison.
Okay, we'll hear from Mr. Madison right now on the subject of 7A, the contract agreement with digital schools.
Sounds good. Good. All right. Thanks, Mike. So,
Thank you.
Just a small thing. I noticed we're locking in an increase rate of 2.8%, which should save us money. I don't know what the prior calculation was. The prior contract isn't in the agenda, but according to the state, the CPI for the past decade has been about 2.4%. For the last 12 months is about 1%. I'm just not clear on how locking in 2.8% is going to save us money based on a contract that was based on CPI before. So that's one issue. Second is just I don't know what that other contract says, but just past experience from my experience negotiating contracts for SaaS things, I hope we have a agreement with them to provide us with our data at the end of this. We used to call that a no data hostage agreement, so that if you do decide to switch vendors, you can get your data exported in some sort of common standard format and get out of it without having to be held hostage for that. So anyway, that's just what I wanted to say. Thanks.
Thank you for your comments. Any other comments, Ann?
Not on this item.
Great. That concludes that. Anyone have concerns as was raised? Staff need any concerns raised by Mr. Madison amongst ourselves? All right. I'm comfortable with this contract.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Got a motion from member Stacy Begin and a second by member Alvarez. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. The motion carries 5-0. Thank you. Item B, approval of master content and tools licensing agreement with the American Heart Association. You have a staff presentation?
Yes, some information on this. We work with the American Heart Association. It's part of our district wellness plan for all of our employees, certificated, classified, and management. This is covered by Viva, so it's a no cost to the district with our friends at Viva that have been able to provide for paying for this service.
Excellent. All right, any questions for staff? Discussion? All right, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second the motion.
Got a motion by member Begin and a second by member Evans. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you very much. The next item under curriculum and instruction, item 8A, approval of the 2020-2021 local agreement for child development services, California State with the California State Preschool Program. Resolution for adoption is number 3320-21. We have a staff presentation on this matter.
Thank you, Mr. Blessing. Yes, this is a great opportunity for us to get reimbursed for some of the costs that we have associated with our preschool programs, about $1.2 million by accepting this item.
Excellent. All right. Any questions from staff? Seeing none, I'll ask for a motion.
I'll move.
I've got a motion by member Evans. Got a second by member Alvarez. All right, no further discussion. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? None. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you very much. I'll try your objection one, maybe. Approval of contract number 8B. Approval of contract with iReady Assessment for the 2021-2021 school year. 2020-2021 school year. Staff?
Yes, this item is for the assessment portion of our iReady Universal Screener. This is a way for us to be able to track the progress of our students from year to year and over multiple years. We started last year from the beginning with just the assessment portion, and we will be using it in the coming year. Staff has been very pleased with the approach that it's taken for our schools.
Great. Thank you very much. Any questions of staff?
No, I just know staff is looking forward to having this through the whole school year and really being able to dive into the data. I know there's lots of teachers that would love to see it, and so I'm excited to see a whole year.
Great. Yeah.
I know as a parent, and seeing iReady work firsthand with my child, it actually was a really great program. So thank you for bringing it in, because it actually did help me as a parent to actually see where he started and where we ended up at the end. So I know that we want to be able to share that information that parents can actually follow their students. We can get that communication out to all our families. Also, it is a great tool to have. So thank you.
Wonderful. That's good to know. All right. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
I've got a motion and
I'll second.
I got a second from member Alvarez. Thank you, Eleanor. No discussion. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you guys so much. Item C, approval of the contract with iReady curriculum for the 2021 school year again. Mercedes?
Yeah, so the first part was for the assessment portion, so that tells us where our students are going. And the second part is our curricular portion, the portion that allows us to take that assessment data and make it actionable so that students can have the opportunities to learn. We'll be using Title I funds for this to ensure that this is equitable for all of our students. So we're very excited. It was piloted this year among all of our middle schools and almost 100% of all of our elementaries as well. And people had very good things to say about it.
Great. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Got a motion from member Begin. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I've got a second from member Evans. All right. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? None. Motion carries 5-0. All right. Item D, adoption of the 2020-21 Local Control and Accountability Plan COVID-19 written report to the community. Staff presentation.
Yes, board, we presented this to you at the last board meeting, and we now need to bring it forward with our budget presentation today as part of the requirements for approving our budget at the County Office of Education.
All righty. Any questions for staff? We had this last meeting. All right. Do we have a motion to adopt?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second it.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. All right. Yeah. All right. Number 9A, approval of contract service agreement with Palomar Family Counseling Services for school-based counseling. Are we going to staff presentation?
Yes, this is the renewal of a contract, the second year of a 3-year contract that's grant funded through Proposition 47 for supplemental counseling services for our students at many of our schools. So this is a very exciting opportunity to add additional social and emotional supports for our most at promise students.
Great. All right. Understand we have a public comment on this. Okay, and we make the call.
Yes, Lisa Turner.
Good evening, Board of Education. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
Okay,
Thank you.
I'm Lisa Turner, the Executive Director of PFCS, Palomar Family Counseling Service. I asked to speak tonight to thank the LCAP committee for their recommendation to renew our contract for the coming year, but also to thank you, distinguished board, for your consideration. You would have received a short report that's a summary that I've already sent over, but I wanted to give you a brief summary now and also to give you the opportunity to ask questions. Despite the adaptations that were needed for us to move to virtual delivery of counseling services beginning in March, PFCS staff worked closely with your school personnel to make this happen smoothly, whether it was by two-way video communication platform or services used just using a regular telephone. The families of all students enrolled in services were reached out to and offered support and resources. Excellent work has followed. While some families reported that their children actually did better when they were at home without certain school-specific triggers, many students experienced an increase in mental health symptoms, whether that was related to COVID or systemic racism and social injustice that has been highlighted in recent weeks. We know that students have experienced fear, sadness, worry, loneliness, anger, boredom, moodiness, grief, outrage, despair, and frustration. They've been able to process these emotions with caring and compassionate therapists. Our counselors have provided grief and loss support to students experiencing losses, including some directly affected or directly related to COVID. They've heard new disclosures of traumatic experiences now that students feel more comfortable addressing the same from the comfort of their own home and without having to return directly to class. They've shown creativity in designing individualized interventions for students using art, movement, and drama. And they've been very successful in engaging parents, many of whom are at home now, and they've been able to provide more family sessions than is typical in order to better support students. This year, we served 639 students across 20 campuses. 6,047 counseling sessions were provided, and that is not including invaluable time spent coordinating and consulting with school personnel, APs, principals, counselors, teachers, and office staff. Data is maintained for accountability, and basic non-confidential data is shared with key staff at each school for better communication. We believe our contract provides significant value to the district, and we are very grateful to be your partners. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your comments and presentation to us. Thank you.
I want to make a comment. I think in these traumatic times that we're in, it's even more important that we have support for social emotional for our students. So I really want to thank Palomar Family Counseling and our counselors that we have at the high school, middle school, and the elementary school to support our students, because it's not going to get better for a while. And all of this is very traumatic for adults, let alone our students. So thanks for the work you do.
I just want to support what Stacy has said, and I'm very much in agreement. This has been trying times, and I know in my household it's been little less than chaotic. So thank you.
In my household, it's been absolute chaos.
So I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second that motion.
We've got a motion by member Begin and a second by member Evans to approve. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you all very much. All right, we will go now to item number 11, which is a public hearing. It's a consideration to rename the San Luis Rey Elementary School. I'm going to open up the public hearing, and we'll take a staff presentation from. We do have a public comment on this one, I believe. Okay. At any rate, I'm going to open this up for public hearing. Is anybody out in the public here to speak on this item?
We had Larry Berry.
Okay. Oh, he left us, you think? Okay. We were going to have, well then, all right, well, we'll close the public hearing and move on to the item 11B, which is the actual consideration to rename the San Luis Rey School and staff presentation. What's the name?
So I have a summary of the work that was put into this effort. So I'll just share that with the board. And this was written by Principal Aranda. The school naming committee was composed of 14 certificated and classified staff and parents from both the Garrison and San Luis Rey communities. Members of the committee represented a diverse set of perspectives and engaged in consensus building through an open, narrow, closed decision-making process. The open phase involved exploring questions of shared identity and possible names within the committee, as well as with the whole staff and families. The narrow phase involved identifying a smaller set of options categorized into tiers and testing those options with a temperature check survey to staff and families. The closing phase involved eliminating options and discussing pros and cons of the remaining options and checking for agreement. The committee met 7 times for a total of 10 hours. Families were invited to participate in a virtual meeting and survey with Blackboard, phone, email, text, and paper flyer surveys, which were distributed at the food distribution site at SLR. The committee continually reflected on the purpose of their task, which was to identify a name that unified both school communities and chose a name that represents inclusion. And I appreciate Dr. Aranda leading this process and all of the people who participated. And the name that they are putting forward for your consideration is Hacienda Elementary School, and that is the home of the Hawks. They feel that this represents the unification of the two schools. Hacienda means home. It's also the street that unifies them. And they believe that this is the best name for this new endeavor that we are engaging in. That is what I submit to the committee.
Great. Sounds wonderful. Any discussion? Any comments from the board?
So I have a question. It's still a visual performing arts school. So is that going to be reflected in the name, or is it just Hacienda Elementary?
Right now, it's Hacienda Elementary. In order for a school to really be in, Dr. Aranda, I know you had conversations about this in your committee, so if you would like to speak further on this, there's a lot of work that goes into actually naming the school as visual and performing arts. And as the school unifies and the staff unifies, those are conversations that I believe the staff is going to further engage in to really talk about what does it mean to be a visual and performing arts school. So beyond theatrical presentations, what else is involved with that? How can that be created? And is that how they want to create themselves? Dr. Aranda, if you'd like to add anything to that, if I left anything out of that comment, please feel free to add to that. So right now, the name is Hacienda Elementary School. And I think where that was left is for further conversation and identification as far as the program goes. But Dr. Aranda, you are on.
Yes, that's exactly right. So it was clear that arts education was highly valued amongst the staff and the families and the community. And we are going to be thinking as a whole, as a staff, what that exactly means within the school day. So beyond our theater program, what other things can we do to really enhance an arts education program for our students? It's something we all truly value, and we want to really spend some time thinking about that.
And it would be very simple after the program is established and actually is well thought out, and we have the materials that we need, the staff knows how that's defined, and they've agreed to do that. It would be very easy to change the byline to School of the Arts. But I think the intention is that they do that with truth, with validity, and with a built-out program.
Makes sense to me. We tasked them with the name of the school, not necessarily some programmatic aspects of it from my perspective, but and that's a deeper discussion. I think if the whole school becomes a school of the arts and fully engulfed in that or not is a good discussion to have. The theater's there and it came along with that group, and I'm assuming that that's still going on, but that doesn't define it as an art school per se. It might be, but to me, it's just an issue, is not an issue of substance at the moment. I think getting to the Hacienda name is the key point at this time, and then let it develop.
Ms. Aranda, can you, on the process of actually going through, was there quite a bit of input from the community, and how did that go as far as feedback for the naming of the actual school?
Yeah, so we had a family meeting, a virtual meeting. It wasn't really well attended, even though we, we did a Blackboard message, email, phone call, text, and we passed out flyers at the food distribution site. But it was representative of both schools. And then we also did a survey to staff and families and got some feedback as well. There was
clearly in the survey, an interest in the arts came out as a definite interest in, and I think a value of the community. And, you know, there are people who felt that San Luis Rey, the name should stay and not be changed. But as a committee worked together, we, you know, continually reflected on what our purpose was, which was to identify a name that embraced both school communities and helped us to move forward. And we really felt that Hacienda represented that because Hacienda Drive is the street that brought the two schools together. And also because Hacienda means a home, which is something that we aspire to be for our students and staff and families. So clearly, those were the large themes.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yeah.
I just want to say thank you again to you and the committee who put in hours of time on this. It's a name can draw a lot of attention and feelings and emotion. And as much as our community puts into their schools and puts time into building the communities around the schools, I know that it doesn't always make everyone happy at first, but we know that it's about the kids and the community, and as the community pulls together even closer over the next year, I hope that they give Hacienda the full chance and the full energy that they will. So thank you again.
And I'm hoping that as we move further, that we look at adding the arts back into it as a name, but for further discussion down the road.
Great. I'm with you on that. Totally.
That is something that they have committed to, I believe. Correct, Dr. Amanda?
Yes, we want to put that into our mission and vision work that we'll be doing with the whole staff and really developing what that might look like.
Great.
I think for me, just because I know you mentioned that now we go back to again, if the majority of the people were saying that they wanted the San Luis Rey, are we taking something away from that community? Because we did talk about the history, we did talk about what it is within the community. Are we taking away from the community had wanted as a whole? Because you did say that the community did voice something about that.
I don't know if it would be the majority, but there is definitely a group, an interest in not changing the name.
Yeah. I'm sure there's an interest that wanted to keep it Garrison too, or want to make it Garrison from that side of it, right? I'm just for sake of argument, I guess, but that's all.
I'd like to say something. I'd like to compliment the committee for adopting a mascot that everyone could kind of identify with and did not have any negative overtones and undertones. So thank you for that.
And also as a bird watcher, yes, accurately, the hawks are always around that school.
Yes, they are. They are always there. That's well apt. That's probably the best name of a mascot of any of our schools.
Educational value.
I don't know. There's too many pirates around.
With the conversation, I'll make a motion to approve the new name.
Thank you. We got a motion to approve. Remember, begin and second by Ms. Evans. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Got one opposed. Raquel Alvarez. Very good. Appreciate that. Motion carries 4-1. All right. Next item is item C, approval of a resolution number 3419-20, requesting the Board of Supervisors of the County of San Diego to establish tax rates for bonds of the Oceanside Unified School District. We have a staff presentation.
Yes, board, this item approves a debt service schedule in anticipation for our summer bond issuance. District staff will come back with a request to authorize issuance of bonds later this summer.
Thank you very much. Do I have a motion?
We had Larry Berry, but I don't think he's not, I don't think he's
not
on
here
the call
anymore.
anymore.
Mr. Berry left the line.
Okay. He'll let us know what he thinks about it later on down the road. We have more opportunities on the bond coming up. Do I have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
A second.
I've got a motion by member Evans, a second by member Alvarez. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you very much. Item D, 11D, a presentation of final report and approval of recommendations made by the Facilities Advisory Committee regarding the Garrison property. You have a staff presentation?
Board, this is a recorded presentation from the 7-Eleven committee regarding Garrison Elementary School. Staff is requesting approval of the submitted report. At this time, Mr. Mill will be playing the presentation and the audio.
We're just having a bit of technical difficulty. Just stand by for just one. I have my volume on, and we'll just stand by for just one moment. I believe there are some 7-Eleven committee members online with us. We seem to be having some challenges with our audio file. So if we can't get that to work, which I'm thinking we're not going to, we're going to need one of those members to walk us through, Dr. Soto. So I know that you'll probably be able to help. I know Charles Finn is on the meeting. I certainly don't want to make him uneasy by calling on him at the last minute. So I'm giving him a little bit of think time. Charles, if you're confident with doing that, I don't think our audio file is available. Dr. Soto, is there anyone else who could assist Charles, or would he like to do this on his own? Would you like to be his helper? Charles,
Mr.
you
Finn
good?
is way more than capable and is very profound with his words. So I believe that Mr. Finn will do a fabulous job and speak on behalf of the asset management.
I concur. Thank you, Charles.
You're
Thank you,
very
Charles.
welcome.
So just give us a minute. We'll put the presentation back up, and then you can walk us through it, Charles, and we appreciate that very much.
No problem. Just let me know when you're ready.
Are we ready, Greg?
Okay, so these are the recommendations and findings of the 7-Eleven committee that we adopted at our last meeting. Next slide. So just to review, our objectives and process are to determine whether property is surplus to the needs of the school district, that it's no longer needed for school use, and to make recommendations in such a case for how that property should be disposed of, example, by selling, leasing, exchanging, or other arrangements. The committee was asked to consider the property of Garrison Elementary School, and the key findings follow. We were considering, first of all, maximizing the use of district assets, considering the financial expenses that would be involved with any reconstruction and repair of the property, and considering the idea of the possible generation of revenue from a one-time sale or an ongoing use agreement that could relieve pressure on the general fund. Next slide, please.
We have a little lag in our technology, Charles. Thank you for
no
your
problem.
patience. I think the Zoom thing is getting tired. This is just what I think, but it's lagging, but it'll catch up in just a second.
And feel free to interrupt with any questions if they come up during the presentation. As long as we have the pause, if you have a question that I can answer, be happy to do it right now.
Charles, I've instructed the board has the presentation in front of them in paper form until our technology catches up. If you have it in paper form in front of you, please feel free to go forward.
No, I only have it in the shared screen version.
Okay.
The next slide is the visual from overhead, and it lists the property address.
Okay, so that slide is showing you what is the Garrison property, what are its boundaries, and the extent of the campus. I believe it also includes showing where some of the issues have been on the campus with regard to some of the physical problems with the land.
Yes, the sinkholes, et cetera, are shown on that as well. Very good.
Okay.
The next slide is a list of information built in 1970, 2 contiguous parcels, sinkhole site depressions discovered in 2019, students moved to SLR, Garrison enrollment data and declining, and that we approved a closure of Garrison on April 28th, 2020.
Check your phone, Charles.
Yes, I
You have a picture.
just opened the file. Thank you. So as Board Member Joyce just put in there, there's some history of the school and how it came to be in this position. So getting to the main part of the presentation, summary of findings, slide 7.
Yes, yes.
Okay, the committee found that there are no conceivable school district educational uses for this property. We also found that in its current condition, the property is not suitable for continued use as an elementary school site. We found that the financial expense involved with reconstruction and repair of the property would be prohibitive. I'm sorry, somebody's taken over my screen, so I can't see the presentation. We found, I'm on number 3, the financial expense involved with reconstruction and repair that would be necessary was not in the best interest of the district. And the 4th finding was based on the committee's review of the information. We concluded that the entire Garrison Elementary property should be considered surplus.
Very good.
So we placed the following recommendations. 1, that the entire site be considered surplus to the educational needs of the district. 2, that the governing board declare Garrison Elementary School as surplus and consider selling, exchanging, or otherwise disposing of the property in any manner which would be in the best interest of the district. And that the board be given the necessary flexibility and discretion in choosing a method of disposition for the property that best serves the district's financial interest and the needs of the district, staff, and community, rather than having the board take it upon itself to recommend a specific course of action.
Great. Thank you, Charles.
You're very welcome.
Appreciate that. Any discussion amongst the board members? I think this is pretty straightforward. Good recommendation. We appreciate the hard work of the committee.
I'll make a motion to adopt the 7-Eleven committee recommendations 1, 2, and 3.
A second.
We've got a motion and a second to adopt the committee's recommendations. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No one. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you very much. All right. Item F, approval of resolution number 3519-.
We need to go back to item E. So we were just on 11D.
we didn't include
50.
that as
We need
part
to
of
do
that?
11E. Dr. Soto?
Absolutely. Thank you. And thank you, Charles, for stepping in and doing the presentation on behalf of asset management. Board, item E is the resolution to officially declare Garrison property as surplus and then move forward with the advertising process to entertain offers on the property.
Make a motion.
Got
I'll
a motion
second.
and a second to move forward with the disposition of the property. With the adoption of the resolution, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Seeing no one, the motion carries 5-0. Thank you very much.
I have a
All that work.
question.
Yeah.
In terms of selling or the property, will we be selling it with the buildings intact, or are we going to demolish the buildings? Or
We've had some discussion about that ourselves. Julie, I don't know if you is going to bring us a recommendation to, because the site's becoming a hazard, just sitting there is costing us money monthly. I believe the understanding is that staff will be bringing us a recommendation to demolish that fairly soon. So we'll be selling the site empty or basically demolish would be the best idea, I think. And prior to any of that happening, we do the proper ceremonies, potentially to recognize Garrison's school's existence in the community with some proper celebration before the demolition occurs.
That is correct. We're researching and I don't believe we have any new information at this time.
thank you.
Cool. All right. Sorry for missing that item there a second ago. I thought we could handle them together. All right. Item F, approval of resolution number 3519-20, authorizing the use of educational protection account revenues for the 2020-2021 fiscal year. Is there a staff presentation?
Yes, board, this is our annual, bless you. This is our annual compliance report that is brought during adopted budget, which indicates that the Educational Protection Act, also known as EPA, has not been assigned to any administrative salaries or related costs.
All right. Thank you, Shannon. Is there any discussion or concerns? If not, can I have a motion?
Go ahead. I'll make that motion.
Got a motion from Member Evans.
I'll second.
I've got a second from Member Begin. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. All right, item G. Here we go. Presentation of the adopted budget and adoption of the budget 2020-2021 and resolution number 3219-20 to identify the amount of budget reductions needed in 2021-22 and 2022-23. The tongue twister. All right, staff presentation. We all went through this last meeting pretty extensively.
Yes, correct, trustees. So good evening, President Blessing, Superintendent Vitale, and esteemed board. Tonight, staff will be presenting the adopted budget. Before I begin, just like at the preliminary, I wanted to take a moment and introduce our Director of Fiscal Services, Tim Golden, who will be co-presenting with me. So let's begin. Next slide, please. Staff will be reviewing changes from the preliminary budget presented on June 9th to our now proposed adopted budget, review multi-year projections, discuss the fiscal stabilization plan, and lastly, next steps. And with that, I'd like to introduce Tim Golden, Director of Fiscal Services, to present the rest of the slides. Thank you.
Good evening, Board and Superintendent Vitale. I have the privilege of bringing the adopted budget proposal here. And on this first slide here, what you're going to see is the budget changes from the proposal that we brought earlier this month on June 9th. And in the first column, that's what we brought on June 9th. And then obviously in the second column, that's going to be what the updated budget is. And then the difference will be in that far right column there. And the main change is some central budget additions to our expenditures. And those are some of the things that we cover centrally that just weren't in the original budget. And some of those items, to be particular, are like covering the maintenance on some of the equipment and gym repair type of things for those high schools, and I think one middle school, but just getting those things kind of cleaned up to make sure that they're included in our official budget here. So what you'll see is just some slight changes there, and really it's going to impact just the ending fund balance by that same amount. And you'll notice at the bottom with the 5% reserve for economic uncertainties, it's going to increase just slightly since our total expenditures are going to be increasing just a little bit. Next slide, please. So here we have the components of the ending fund balance, and you'll see the changes here. Really, there were no changes in our components of the ending fund balance, with the exception of that reserve for economic uncertainty, since it is 3% of our total expenditures, or 5% of our total expenditures. Any increase in the total expenditure is going to relate to a slight increase there. Next slide, please. So on this slide here, you'll see the breakdown of the state required 3% and our board policy of 5%. And we're just going to outline really what the difference is between the two. So we're going to outline that the 3% of our budget would be $6.705 million, and the additional 2% to get us to our 5% reserve is going to be about that $4.4 million, which will make up the entire $11.175 million that you'll see there. So that's just outlining our board policy as it pertains to our reserve. The next slide, please. The next slide here is part of Ed Code, where districts are required to state their excess reserves. And as you noticed from our presentation earlier this month, we don't have any excess reserves based on the cuts that the governor had proposed in his May revision. So really, this is just a formality to show that we don't have any excess reserves that we're projecting there. And next slide, please. And we'll take a look here at our MYP, so our multi-year projection. Next slide, please. So this slide's going to break down our proposed adopted budget and the subsequent 2 years. Now, with the updated expenditures included in this budget, you'll see that the additional reserve amount there, that's the one that I want to highlight, is the 11 million. That's what we would need in reductions to meet that 5% reserve that is part of our board policy, to meet that 11.175 number there. So pushing those expenditures out into each of the next couple of years, you'll see those numbers start to kind of balloon as they get further out. Now, this information is based on the governor's May revision. You might know yesterday the governor did reach an agreement with legislators on a budget. So it's going to be vastly different from what you see right now. And I won't really outline all those specifics because the trailer bills are still coming out and a lot of that information is really still being kind of ironed out. But we will have the opportunity to do a 45-day revision to the budget where we can incorporate the numbers that we have from the governor with his agreement with the legislation. So we will continue to be working on this ever-changing budget as it seems, but really, this presentation here is not going to be much different than the June 9th, since there wasn't enough material differences and there was no agreement with the governor and legislature at the time. So next slide, please. This is just going to go through our components of the ending fund balance for the multi-year projection. You'll notice non-spendable, those items don't really move each year. The restricted balance starts to dwindle down a little bit as we start to spend down some of the restricted funds. And you'll see the reserve is pretty stagnant, but what's important here is the ending fund balance being a negative in those second and third years there. So with that, I will take this opportunity to reintroduce Shannon so she can go over some of the fiscal stabilization items.
Can I just add one comment?
Sure.
It seems, I know it seems, am I on mute? Yeah. For anyone else that's having a complete heart attack at those numbers, I just want to reiterate that we had to present based on the numbers from May. So it's not signed legislation, so we can't report out on something that's not completed. But just for everyone that's not fully following the state budget at all times of the day, like some of us are, this is not going to be where we end up. So look for that revision within the 45 days. It's extremely important. And all the people that did advocate, as we asked you to over the last couple months, thank you, because the deal was reached because of that pressure from people that said, fund our schools. Thank you.
You're absolutely correct. Thank you, Trustee Joyce, for that clarification. And you're right. As Mr. Golden mentioned, we were waiting for the agreement between the legislators and Governor Newsom. And while it has finally come through, it is much after what is our required reporting. And so with that, we are in a qualified budget status. And so we will have to have a fiscal stabilization plan in order to meet the compliance. So you're so fast, Mr. Moon. There we go. Thank you. So the fiscal stabilization plan, this is what you saw on June 9th. This was under the assumption that we would be required to budget off the May revise. And as such, the slide will stay until the 45-day revision that we'll be bringing to the board. We're moving forward with this for now, knowing that staff will not be asking for reductions at this time, that we believe that there's an opportunity for us to live year to year until we get through this COVID situation that we are experiencing right now. But what we did present is on the next slide is a sample multi-year projection based upon the legislative discussions. So what you'll see here is a what-if scenario. This is based upon what we feel is most probable, and that is an assumption that for the 2021 year, the revenue will stay at 1920, which is kind of the current year we're still in, but we'll have a 0% COLA. Remember, we had the assumption of a negative 7.92% COLA. So that's significant. And that's how you'll see that we're not going to be under the assumption that everything is as we are receiving word, that we will not need to have the expenditure reductions, that we will be able to meet the expenditures for our responsibilities for the current year of 2021. Now, we know our out years are always of concern. We know that there's lots of changes in the out years, and we know that we budget our revenue differently in the out years as we do differently for our expenditures, and that is based upon compliance for us. However, we want to make sure we get through the current year. We have every indication that we will be able to get through the current year without the reductions. So with that, staff presents this slide as information only, and that we're not able to actually budget off of this, but that this is the consideration that staff is considering moving forward, waiting for details as Mr. Golden mentioned. And so with that, next slide, please. So staff is asking for approval of the adopted 2021 budget with the resolutions based upon the May revise, knowing that we will have to send this to the County Office of Education for approval, at which time then we will receive further guidance as to what our 45-day revision will look like. We know that unaudited actuals and that we're closing our books and that there will be some one-time money that will be coming to us because COVID shut us down and our expenditures decreased and declined significantly. You may see this year a significant amount of one-time money that's being saved because we didn't spend it all during the March through June, apologies. And now we will see that there will actually be carryover that we can use as one-time money even for 2021. Now, we don't want to use that for ongoing expenses. That's bad practice for budgeting. However, There's plenty of one-time expenditures that we need. That could be devices, that could be hotspots, that could be facilities. So there's things that we can do with that, but recognize that this year would be very significant on our year-end close with regards to the carryover, more so than any other year. So with that, we look forward to bringing you a revision as soon as possible, knowing that there will be the not only a revision 45 days, but the unaudited actuals coming in September 8th. And with that, staff is asking for approval of the adopted budget, and we're Mr. Gold and I are here for any questions. Thank you.
I have one.
Yes.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead, Stacy.
ADA, is there a hold harmless talk of that going on with the digital learning hybrid?
I'm sorry, Trustee Begin. What I heard, Trustee, and Tim, please correct me. What I heard is that we're held harmless and that we're actually held at the 1920. So it's just the current school year. So moving into the current year, or the future year, the 2021, we'll actually be using the ADA for 1920, which is significant for us. And it actually will help not only Oceanside, but many districts in the state. So that was what it was agreed upon.
I would. Anyways, the out years look bleak. I'm happy to hear that 2021 that we're good. But yeah, I'll try not to stress about the out years.
No, not for 45 days anyway.
Yeah.
Do we have a speaker? We do, yes. Ann?
Todd Madison.
Todd Madison. Get him up.
All right, thanks.
There he is. There you go.
Thank you. So today we saw some good news from the state. As we just saw, stands that look like they're going to be projecting giving us more money. That's awesome. We'll see how the deferral thing works. Seems to be a challenge for some districts, but so far so good. Fortunately, we're likely to see that 45-day number be completely different. We can all cross our fingers and hope for that. Of course, even with the revision, we're still looking at $12 million in deficit spending, which we're just funding out of our reserves. Whether it's a total bloodbath or just a more normal multi-million-dollar deficit, there'll be undoubtedly be some cuts to be made at some point. Tonight, all I want to say is that the district and board need to figure out a way to make those cuts with minimal impact on our kids. The parents of Oceanside have gone through enough, and there's more to come. We need the district to figure out how to get out of this without hurting the kids any further, and without cutting staff as well. Layoffs are not the way to go. Now is not the time to reduce the support our kids get in their education. Many ways we can do that. I've proposed a number of them in the past. Let's look hard at those possibilities and make the right decisions this time. Let's put the kids first this time around. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers, Ann? No more speakers. All right.
I'll make a motion to approve the adopted budget. A second.
Wonderful. Got a motion and a second. Ann, did you get that from Member Begin made the motion and Member Alvarez made the second? All right. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I will. Yes, Eleanor.
I feel a whole lot more positive about this budget compared to the last time we discussed budget. So thank you, Dr. Soto, for your hard work.
I want to second that. Yeah, I want to second that. I commend you all for your hard work, and I know the next 45 days are also going to be just as stressful for you all, and I don't envy you at all. And thank you again for all your continued hard work.
It really was a team effort, but I've got to thank and commend the
All right.
board for
Thank
putting
you.
the opportunity out there so others can call the legislators and make sure that fair funding was appropriate funding was addressed. New superintendent worked with other superintendents to make sure that our needs were not only addressed but heard, and it really was a full effort. So we appreciate the opportunity to look forward to bringing a different budget in 45 days.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, staff. We appreciate it. All right. No, we haven't yet. We're going to take a vote right now. Are we ready? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? None. The budget carries 5-0. Thank you very much. All right. That concludes the items for this evening's regular agenda. So now we go move on to public comments on agenda items that are not on our agenda. Do we have how many speakers do we have, Ann?
One,
We have
Mr.
one,
Madison.
okay. Todd Madison. Mr. Madison, you got it.
Right. Thank you. I think I'm still unmuted. Okay, so this time around, I'm just speaking as a founding member of San Diego Schools. We're an advocacy group, parents from around the county, helping parents make their voices heard, improving education in our county. The goal is to improve transparency, accountability, and equity in the school districts throughout the county. We've been living in difficult times. All our school districts are facing serious challenges, as you just saw. We've seen the budget issues, reopening plans. Parents need to have a voice in those issues. We've seen a lot of turmoil over policing issues. We need parents to be involved in how school site policing is handled in their district. Our mission is to provide assistance and advocate on behalf of involved parents. The best interests of our kids need to come first in every decision that's made. The volunteers at San Diego Schools can help parents better understand how their school district operates, get involved with their district and make things better, and ultimately get the most value for their kids' education. We're going to have community-based learning opportunities, webinars, Zoom meetings, discussions on topics like what is the role of DPAC, how does the LCAP process give us input on funding. We hope parents will gain a better understanding of how education works to help them participate in that process. We've established a website at sandiegoschools.net and a related Facebook group, San Diego Schools, intended to act as a central hub for information, giving parents and students the ability to find answers and resolve problems. Everyone is encouraged to visit our site, sandiegoschools.net, sign up for our email list, join our Facebook group to stay in the loop. Of course, everyone here in Oceanside should follow the Oceanside DPAC group to keep in touch with district events, as well as the Oceanside Unified Schools Parent Network group for more general news and updates. Parents and kids deserve a voice in their child's educational opportunities. We look forward to working with parents and school districts in San Diego County toward that end. Putting kids first should be the first priority in education. Join us and help make that happen. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Madison. And that concludes this evening's meeting. Thank you all, members of the board, for participating. It's a long one, 9:30 night, my virtual meeting too. That's quite a bit. But with no further discussion amongst our members, I will adjourn this meeting to our next meeting, which is not set yet, but we'll be stay tuned. Thank you very much. Good night, everybody.